Saturn, whoosh. They say at its worst, it's where you feel restricted, limited, or where you face obstacles, but at its best, it's what you can build towards. It shows exactly where and how you are meant to construct your life. And it's only through working with Saturn actively that you can actually reap the rewards. But at one point, I went through this philosophical dilemma myself. I thought, if my Saturn is just what is restricted in my life, then what is stopping me from just ignoring it? If I don't want to deal with it, why can't I just push it away? And interestingly, asking that question is exactly what frames the answer to the question. And it's because that question highlights the core of the mechanic of Saturn. Because the reason we can't avoid Saturn is because Saturn represents the laws of physics and time. And those are two laws that anchor us into the human experience. You cannot opt out of gravity as long as you're on Earth, and you can't opt out of Saturn. This video will not only break down how to work with your Saturn placement by sign and house to reap the lessons and rewards of your Saturn placement, but I will also break down how the ruling planet of your Saturn by sign and house will not only influence how you could experience these themes personally, but it could provide an extra tool for you that can help you learn to master this placement as much as truly possible. And so back to what I was discussing before, your Saturn placement is a challenge because whether you want to run away from it or face it head on, you still have to deal with it. This energy will play out in the same way that a clock will always tick. You essentially have two choices. You can face the consequences of ignoring the clock, or you can get the reward of respecting the time and building the structure it's actually asking for. And you can choose to ignore the work of Saturn, but you cannot ignore the result of not working. So if you try to bypass these restrictions, you don't escape the pressure. You just compound it into a crisis for your future self. And so Saturn is the gatekeeper of structures, which means the only way to hold anything valuable, whether it's a career, a relationship, or a legacy, is to voluntarily accept the weight of building it. And so now that we have that out of the way, go down to the timestamps, look for your placements. If you don't know how to calculate the sign and house of the ruler of Saturn, I do have a graphic on the screen. And so now let's get to the heart of the matter in 3, 2, 1, go. Saturn in Aries can specifically put a restriction on your forward-moving, instinctual, or action-oriented nature. I actually have this placement as well. And you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your ability to just go. And this may stem from a feeling that every time you try to initiate something, the door slams shut in your face and stops you from having what you want in some way. And it could feel like the universe is actively working against your speed, really forcing you to sit in the waiting room while everybody else gets to run and do what they want. Or you could simply feel like this heavy weight of frustration or somatic pressurized heat in your body where you almost have this urge to strike or move, but the external circumstances constantly force you to wait. And in some cases, you could feel like you are fighting a war with your hands tied behind your back, or kind of like you're driving a car with a parking brake permanently engaged. And Saturn really puts a delay on your instinct in some way. It forces you to calculate your attacks and your movements carefully, or it forces you to build your willpower from scratch in order to really embody a strength that doesn't burn out the second it meets resistance. And so this restriction specifically impacts your ruling planet of Mars, since this handles your instinct and drive for immediate action. And so Saturn is basically slowing down your natural impulse to just go so that you can develop the discipline to turn your energy into calculated power that will actually last. And with that practice, your Mars energy could be refined into a consistent engine of will that can really sustain effort over the long haul. And so if you shrink from the pressure of Saturn, you risk really becoming self-destructive. You could turn that heat inward and become impatient or especially hard on yourself because you can't get your way. Or you could burn out from starting 100 different projects that you drop the moment it gets hard because you're so addicted to the start but terrified of sort of the middle stages or of failure when success really isn't certain. And you could risk becoming somebody who loses your confidence when your flame doesn't really catch and you realize you still need to to build the structure for that fire to sustain. You need the wood if you want the fire to burn. And so for some, you could walk through life feeling angry or blocked because of this, which is a large burden to carry. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first trading speed for stamina. Really get that firewood together, because your mission is to become the general with a sustainable plan rather than just a soldier who's simply ready to conquer. And the restriction is there to sort of ensure that when you do finally strike, you don't miss. And so you can build a reputation for endurance, power, and most importantly, a sense of confidence, all which can coexist without burning out. And you are meant to develop a willpower that is truly built from the ground up. It has to come from yourself. It's not going to come from an outside source. And by the time you mature, you are the person who is capable of handling high stress situations. So cool and confident because you have mastered this ability to hold your fire until the perfect moment. And you don't need to rush to win, nor do your wins need to be immediate, and nor does anyone need to validate that win aside from yourself. And once you do work on patience, patience is the key word. No matter how that looks, your actions will be colored with a force and timing that is truly unbreakable. Saturn in Taurus can specifically put a restriction on your steady, methodical, and grounded nature in some ways, and you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your security and your stability, and this could stem from this almost pervasive anxiety that the ground beneath you is constantly shifting, or that you're not safe enough to really rest. And it could feel like the universe really denies you the soft life or the ease that seems to fall into the laps of everybody else, which really forces you to really work for every inch of comfort that you get. Or you could just simply feel a heavy weight of survival and really feeling this tightness in your chest, or a fear that if you stop working for even a second, you'll lose everything you've built. And in some cases, you could feel paralyzed by the cost of things, terrified that you aren't worthy of nice things unless you have suffered for it first. And Saturn puts a delay on your ability to just receive. It forces you to really check and audit every penny and plan and every step that you take carefully, or it forces you to build your own floorboards from scratch in order to really embody a security that is actually yours and not just dependent on luck. And this weight feels heavy here because Taurus is ruled by the sign of Venus, and that planet really covers your values, your comfort, and your personal taste, because Saturn is kind of limiting your access to external ease to really force you to build a sense of security and worth that is substantial and just as much internal as it is external. And through that process, you can really hone in your Venus-like nature into this rock-solid self-sufficiency, potentially transforming your desire for simple comfort into capability to generate lasting stability. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you could risk becoming paralyzed by the inertia or a fear of moving. Like, for example, maybe you stay in a job that drains you, or a relationship that doesn't work, or a living situation that is toxic, solely because the unknown feels way too unsteady to risk. Or you could hoard your energy and your resources, really terrified that if you let go of anything, you will fall into the abyss. And you risk becoming somebody who possesses nice things in your life, but really lacks the confidence to enjoy it. And you could feel forever stuck in a false safety that is actually like a prison. And for some, you could walk through life feeling scarce and guarded, regardless of what you own, which is a large burden to carry. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first becoming your own bedrock, your own foundation. And your mission is to build tangible, undeniable value that belongs to you alone, and ensure that value holds up no matter what life brings you, rather than just relying on external structures to hold you up. And the restriction is there to teach you how to generate security rather than just collecting resources. And so you can build a foundation that will not be shaken even by an earthquake. And most importantly, you can build a sense of self-worth that exists independently of surface level value. And so you are meant to develop a substance that is truly built from your hands from the ground up. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has mastered the material plane through hard labor, or maybe even just slow, methodical saving. It doesn't need to be, super grunty, if you know what I mean. And you don't need to rely on luck to be safe, nor does the world state dictate your value. That is a key here. And once you work on this foundation, however that looks, it can look different for everybody. Your life will really be colored with a stability and a worth that is truly unshakable. So Saturn in Gemini can specifically put a restriction of your clever, investigative, and curious nature. And you could feel like this heavy gravity almost regarding your intelligence or your words. And this may stem from a fear of being misunderstood, or maybe you felt like you were unintelligent during your early years, maybe by classmates or by parents, or you're just somehow feeling restricted in your ideas or your communications in some way. And it could feel like there's almost this heavy filter between your brain and your mouth, which really forces you to rehearse a sentence 10 times in your head before you say it out loud almost. Or it doesn't have to be like that. It could simply feel like a heavy weight of scrutiny, and you feel like every thought you have is kind of being graded by a strict teacher, which really stifles your natural curiosity. And in some cases, you could feel a mental delay where you feel the need to process information very slowly to ensure you don't make a mistake, which leads you to silence yourself when you don't necessarily have to. And Saturn really puts a delay on your processing speed as well, because it forces you to almost like barricade the river of your mind and really organize it carefully, or it forces you to verify the facts straight from scratch in order to really embody a voice that can actually be trusted. And so the pressure is applied here because Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, and that's the planet that's really responsible for your intellectual processing and how you filter information. And Saturn is slowing down this mental mechanism to really ensure that you are actually organizing your thoughts into a structure that is not only factually sound, but also really understandable. And it's with this mastery that you can really hone your mercurial mind from this scattered collector of information into a precise architect of ideas, and really giving your words real weight as well as expertise. But if you shrink away from this pressure, you really risk dissolving into the noise. And so you could mask your insecurity with nervous chatter or gossip or superficial facts that say absolutely nothing because you are terrified of depth. Or you could become a jack of all trades who knows a little bit about everything but really understands the mechanics of nothing because you fear you aren't really intelligent or clever enough to know how to really wield your knowledge. And you risk becoming somebody who loses your voice entirely because you assume nobody wants to hear it, or you talk around a subject without ever really landing on a point. And for some, you could just walk through life feeling intellectually very hollow, or like a fraud who is afraid to be asked a hard question, which could be a very large burden for you to carry. And so Saturn here is really forcing you to build by first mastering the weight of your words and your thoughts and your ideas. And your mission is to become an authority on what you speak rather than just a messenger of information. And the restriction is there to force you to verify the facts. And so you can build a mind that really cuts through the noise almost like a laser beam. And most importantly, you can really develop a sense of intellectual confidence that stands up to scrutiny. And you are meant to develop an expertise that is truly built from scratch from your own ideas. And by the time you mature, you will become the person whose words carry the gravity of truth because you don't speak unless you know, and people are going to trust you because of that. And you don't need to be the loudest to be the smartest, nor do you need to fill the silence to prove you are there. And once you work on your voice, on your mindset, however that looks, it can look different for everybody. Your communication will be molded with a clarity and a precision that really commands absolute attention. Saturn in Cancer can specifically put a restriction on your intuitive, empathetic, or your passion-driven nature. That's what the moon is. And so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your emotional safety, maybe your sense of home or security. And this could stem from a childhood environment that felt a little bit cold, where you had to be the emotional adult in the room for a long time, even well before you were ready. Or it could be for other reasons as well. Maybe you just feel emotionally stifled for some reason, and it could feel like the universe really denied you the right to be vulnerable in some instances, which really forces you to dry your own tears because no one else was coming to really do it for you. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of responsibility for the feelings of everyone around you. Maybe you feel like a parent to your own parents, or maybe you feel a parent to your peers, whatever it may be. And in some cases, you could feel like a stranger in the environments where you were meant to feel safe, or like you have to build a wall around your heart just to survive the weather of the emotional storm. And Saturn here really puts a delay on your ability to just melt into emotional vulnerability, and it forces you to suppress your own dependency and to guard your soft spots very carefully, or it forces you to parent yourself from scratch in order to really embody a sense of safety that doesn't disappear when people leave. And there's almost this heavy gravity here because Cancer is ruled by the moon, which really handles your internal sense of safety and how your body responds to the environment. And Saturn is limiting your ability to find comfort externally, and it forces you to construct a sense of emotional stability and protection that comes directly from within. And it's through this mastery that your moon-like energy can really be refined into a proactive, sort of cage of emotional fortitude. And it really helps you to become a source of safety, not only for yourself, but for others. If you shrink away from this pressure, though, you really risk becoming emotionally calcified. And what I mean by this is you could adopt a persona of such extreme independence, or like a shell almost, where you refuse to let anybody help you because you are terrified of the debt that might come with it, because you learn that maybe, emotional vulnerability is transactional. Or you could become a martyr who complains that no one cares about me while simultaneously slapping away every hand that tries to hold you. And you risk becoming someone who ends up so lonely and isolated within your own walls, effectively almost starving yourself of connection, the same connection that you so crave with this placement. And for some, you could walk through life feeling cold and untouched, which is a large burden to carry, but it's not one that you have to carry, trust me. And so Saturn here is forcing you to build by first defining what emotional safety means on your own terms. And your mission is to build a true emotional safe haven, both internally and externally, rather than just waiting to be invited into one. And the restriction is there to force you to move from being the child who was denied care to the elder who provides it and who alchemizes their experiences into building that for themselves. And so you can really build a heart that provides, is a safe haven, and most importantly, it does bring a sense of emotional security that comes from within, which is unbreakable. And you are meant to develop a almost nurturing quality that is truly built from scratch. And by the time you mature, you could become the person who provides the most stable, unshakable emotional support. Or maybe you're someone who's really good at expressing your passion because you had to learn how to generate it with yourself. And you don't need to inherit an emotionally safe space in order to have one, nor do you need to be dependent to be loved, even though that is our natural instinct. And once you work on this sense of safety, however that looks for you, your care will be so colored with a depth and a safety that feels like such a harbor in the storm that anybody will feel safe in. Saturn in Leo can really put a restriction of your expressive, creative, and your virtuous nature that naturally wants to radiate light. And so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your ego and your ability to be seen. And this may stem from feeling like every time you try to shine, you are either told that you are too much, or maybe you're ignored completely, or maybe you felt like you were outshined by somebody else who was a little bit more worthy than you. And it can really feel like the universe almost acts as a strict audience that really refuses to clap, and it forces you to radiate your light to an empty room while everybody else gets a standing ovation for doing the same or even for doing less as you. And it can feel a little bit unfair, and not from an egotistical sense, but from, a fairness sense. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of the spotlight itself. Maybe you feel terrified that if you step into it, you will be exposed as a fraud, or that your light isn't bright enough to matter, or that, maybe you've rejected the light so much that you don't want to put yourself out there because you label it as vain and you just reject it altogether. And in some cases, maybe you could feel invisible, or like you have to wear a mask of confidence that feels incredibly heavy to keep up, or like you're constantly auditioning for a role that you're never going to get. And Saturn puts a delay on your applause. It really forces you to evaluate your need for validation and check your ego at the door, or it forces you to build your self-expression and your confidence from scratch in order to embody a recognition that is earned through mastery rather than demanded. This restriction is very significant because Leo, as you know, is ruled by the sun, which is the planet that represents your vitality, your core identity. And Saturn is blocking the ease of external expression to really force you to develop a sense of self and creative power that is self-sustaining. And with this practice, you can refine your sun-like energy into radiant self-sourced authority that really naturally commands respect. And so if you shrink away from this pressure, you really risk becoming bitter because you could hide in the shadows and judge others for their success while secretly wishing it was you, really creating a toxic resentment that really poisons your own creativity. Or you could swing to the other extreme and become this almost like tyrant who demands attention through drama or bravado because you haven't done the work to earn the recognition. Or you risk becoming someone who wears a costume of confidence but collapses in the moment that someone challenges your vision or sense of authority. And for some, you could walk through life feeling unappreciated or unseen because of this, which could be a large burden for you to carry. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first separating your worth from the applause that may come with it. And your mission is to build authentic radiance and creative leadership, no matter how that looks to you, rather than just seeking to be recognized without that foundation being built. And the restriction is there to force you to get truly good at what you do. And so you can build a legacy, or you can even just build, happiness within yourself, or you could build creative power that really stands on solid ground of talent and discipline and true confidence. And most importantly, also a sense of self-respect that does not need external validation to survive. And you are meant to almost develop a regality that is truly built from the ground up. And by the time you mature, you are the person who commands respect, not only because you're the loudest, but because your impact is undeniable. And you don't need to beg to be seen, nor do you need to this constant praise to know that you are valuable, nor does anyone need to give you permission to shine. And once you work on this light, however that looks, your radiance will be flavored and colored with this dignity and warmth that draws people in without you having to say a word. Saturn in Virgo can specifically put a restriction on your detailed nature that is geared towards analysis and refinement, and it really values practical and thoughtful application. And you could feel heavy gravity regarding the chaos of life, and this could stem from a deep-seated feeling that something is wrong or that nothing is ever quite good enough to pass inspection. Whether you experience the consequences of, a hypercritical energy, or whether you witness failing systems yourself, this is where it could stem from. And it could feel like the universe really demands perfection while everybody else gets to get away with being messy, and it forces you to fix everybody else's mistakes, or it allows you to, sort of have to take on the burden of your mistakes while other people get away with it. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of the mundane and feel very overburdened by duties, service, and the feeling that if you stop working even for a second, your life or your worth will fall apart. And in some cases, you could feel paralyzed by details, feeling like you are the only one who sees the cracks in the system, or feeling a somatic tension in your gut telling you to fix, sort, or clean before you're allowed to relax. And Saturn puts a delay on your satisfaction. It forces you to audit every flaw and refine every method carefully, or it forces you to build a system of living that actually works in order to embody a life that functions efficiently. And the pressure is applied here because Virgo is ruled by Mercury, specifically focusing on analysis and practical utility. And Saturn is testing your ability to process the details of life, forcing you to move beyond anxiety to build a system of daily living that is functionally impeccable. And through this mastery, you can really hone in your mercurial skills into true craftsmanship, potentially allowing your service to become a pillar of reliability for yourself and for others. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you really risk falling into analysis paralysis. You could become so focused with the details and fixing that you never finish the project because the standard is impossibly high. Or you could spiral into hypochondria or obsessive control, really trying to micromanage your environment because you feel out of control internally. And you risk becoming somebody who acts as a critic, who tears everything down but builds nothing, really trapped in a cycle of busy work that keeps you distracted from making any real progress. And this could be experienced both internally or externally. And for some, you could walk through life feeling anxious or overburdened because of this, which is such a large weight for you to carry. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first turning chaos into order, and your mission is to become the master craftsman of your life rather than just a servant of your anxieties. And the restriction is there to teach you efficiency. And so you can stop worrying about things being flawless for the sake of anxiety and really focus on things being functional for the sake of, what does it provide, for the sake of the service. And most importantly, you can develop a sense of competence that knows that you can handle the details. And you are meant to develop a mastery that is truly built from scratch. You have to build it from the ground up. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has developed a skill or a set of skills or a body of work that is practically perfect because you put in the work to turn that system into something truly functional and sustainable without it needing to be perfect. And you don't need to be neurotic to be effective, nor do you need to fix the whole world to be okay. And once you work on this method, however that looks, your skills will be flavored with this reliability and usefulness that makes you or your work indispensable either to yourself or to the world. Saturn in Libra can specifically put a restriction of your nature that is very balanced, fair, and understands things through the lens of others. You have to remember Libra is the diplomat, and you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your sense of balance, your one-on-one interactions, and your sense of fairness, and this could stem from a feeling that you are always the one doing the heavy lifting to keep the peace. It could feel like the universe really denies you the superficial harmony that seems to come so easily to others, forcing you to look at the cracks in every dynamic you are a part of. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of duty the moment you connect with someone, feeling like bonds are a contract rather than a joyride or a joyful experience. And in some cases, you could feel incredibly lonely even when you are with others, feeling like there is this wall of glass between you and another person that you can't break through. Or you could simply just feel somatic exhaustion after interactions that are triggering almost this need to be constantly calculating the balance of a room. And Saturn puts a delay on your ability to just get along or to just accept things regardless of the balance. And it forces you to vet your environment and your boundaries so carefully. And it forces you to build your understanding of justice completely from scratch in order to embody balance and connection that is actually fair. And this restriction specifically impacts your ruling planet of Venus, which rules over how you relate to others and find balance. And Saturn is testing the structural integrity of your connections to ensure that your sense of fairness is built on a solid foundation of justice. And it's through this mastery that your Venus-like nature may be transformed into an active architect of justice, really enabling you to build partnerships or a sense of balance and fairness and harmony that can actually weather any storm, no matter how crazy the storm is. But if you really shrink away from this pressure, you do risk falling into superficial appeasement. And so you could become a chronic people pleaser who agrees with everybody just to avoid the friction of Saturn, really losing your own voice and sense of internal harmony in the process. Or you could swing the other way and isolate yourself completely to avoid the risk of rejection or the burden of commitment, as you fear this will throw off the internal balance that you want to carry. And you risk becoming somebody who stays in dynamics that look perfect on paper, but is hollow on the inside because you are too afraid to address the structural issues of what needs to be balanced. And for some, you could walk through life feeling anxious or disconnected, which is a large burden to carry. And you can also lack confidence. Maybe you lack feeling beautiful in some cases. And that doesn't have to be how this placement plays out. There are ways to, work with Saturn, because Saturn is really forcing you to build by first moving from keeping the peace to this almost building justice mindset. And your mission is to become a master of contracts rather than just a passive participant in life who keeps the peace without establishing the structure to do so. And the restriction is there to teach you that connection, balance, and harmony is a structure that requires maintenance. And so you can build connections, whether romantic or business, or you can build a sense of harmony that is strong enough to withstand the test of time. And most importantly, you can build a sense of self that can establish equilibrium equilibrium that isn't dependent on anybody, and you can feel beautiful in your skin while doing that. And you are meant to develop an integrity that is truly built from scratch, from the ground up. You got to build it yourself. And by the time you mature, you are the person who understands that true harmony isn't about never fighting. It's about having a foundation strong enough to survive the fight and establish fairness with diplomacy. And you don't need to fake harmony to be safe, nor do you need to sacrifice your balance to keep someone else upright. And once you work on this mechanism with connecting to the world, however that looks, your life will be colored with relationships, maybe harmony, and a balanced endurance, and a sense of beauty and identity that is truly unbreakable. Saturn in Scorpio can specifically put a restriction of your deep investigative and powerful nature, and you could feel heavy gravity regarding maybe intimacy, trust, and your own psychological shadow. And this could stem from an immense pressure to hide your true self because you have learned early on that being seen was dangerous for some reason. It could feel like the universe puts a lid on your intensity, and it forces you to control your passions and your psychic sensitivity rather than just letting them spill out uncontrollably. And your intensity can be like a boiling kettle, or you could simply feel a heavy weight of the unspoken and feel the undercurrents of power and betrayal in a room more acutely than anybody else, really creating a somatic locking down of your energy, specifically in your gut, where you physically brace yourself against merging with others or, letting your guard down as your alarm bells go off. And in some cases, you could feel this deep-seated fear that if you let someone in or if you let your guard down, that your power will be stolen or they could take something from you that you can't get back. And Saturn puts a delay on your trust for people and for outside forces. And it forces you to navigate the dark waters of the psyche carefully, or it forces you to build your emotional fortitude completely from scratch in order to embody a power that is truly yours. And this heavy gravity exists because Scorpio is ruled by both Mars traditionally and Pluto in modern astrology. And those are the planets responsible for drive and intensity. And Saturn is placing a containment field almost around this energy to force you to manage your power dynamics and trust with absolute control. And it's with this mastery that you can refine the intensity of Mars and Pluto, potentially turning a fear of vulnerability into psychological strength that allows you to navigate deep emotions with such command and power. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you do risk becoming paranoid when paranoia isn't needed. You could become obsessive, manipulative, or maybe even secretive in some cases, viewing every interaction as a power struggle that you have to win in order to stay safe. Or you could rely on other people's energy almost in a way because you refused to build your own out of fear of having it taken from you. And you risk becoming somebody who hovers on the surface of life, really refusing to dive as deep as you want because you are terrified of the monsters that lie down below. And for some, you could walk through life feeling guarded and suspicious because of this, which is a very large burden to carry, but you don't have to carry it because Saturn is forcing you to build by first facing the dark without blinking and doing so without fear as you build your own power, which cannot be stripped. And your mission is to become an alchemist rather than just a survivor. And the restriction is there to ensure that you are strong enough to handle the intensity of transformation without being consumed by it. And so you can build a psychological stability within yourself that is so powerfully strong. And most importantly, you can build a sense of self-trust that knows you can survive any betrayal. You are meant to develop a fortitude that is truly built from your hands from the ground up. And by the time you mature, you are the person who can manage crises, trauma, and heavy themes in life with absolute calm because you know exactly how to navigate the depths. And you don't need to fear the shadows, nor do you need to control everyone or everything to be safe. And once you work on this power, however that looks, your presence will be colored with a magnetic force and a resilience that nothing can destroy. Saturn in Sagittarius can specifically put a restriction of your optimistic, expansive nature that is eager for new experiences. And so you could feel heavy gravity regarding your worldview, your sense of adventure, your optimism, or your freedom. And this could stem from a crisis of faith where the world has felt small, limiting, or devoid of magic in some way due to your early experiences. And maybe you were conditioned with a worldview that feels limiting or a heavy weight from what you did believe believe. And it could feel like the universe puts up roadblocks every time you try to embrace optimism or every time you try to expand your mind, really forcing you to stay put and deal with the mundane details you simply just want to break from. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of needing to prove why you believe what you believe, feeling like your philosophy is constantly being tested against the hard rock of reality or the judgmental eye of others. And in some cases, you could feel somatic heaviness in your hips or your legs or the parts of the body designed for movement, as if you were trying to run a marathon in boots made of lead, really blocked from the higher expansive energy that you oh so crave. And Saturn puts a delay on your expansion. It really forces you to edit your beliefs and check your facts carefully, or it forces you to build your own moral code completely from scratch in order to embody a wisdom that actually holds up in your life. And the pressure is applied here because Saturn is ruled by Jupiter, which is the planet that rules over your expansion and your search for meaning. And Saturn is grounding your natural optimism to force you to stress test your beliefs against reality, really ensuring that your worldview is based on wisdom that actually holds up. And it's through this mastery that your Jupiterian vision could be refined into a grounded, resilient wisdom that can serve as a true compass for your life. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you could risk becoming dogmatic, or on the opposite side of the spectrum, cynical. And you could cling to a rigid set of beliefs simply because it provides safety, really refusing to question anything because the void feels a little bit too scary. Or you could become a perpetual wanderer who knows a little bit about a lot of things but truly believes in nothing, floating from one idea to the next without ever landing, as if you are afraid that you will lose that expansive magic if you do land. And you risk becoming somebody who preaches freedom while living in a mental cage of your own making, unable to find the meaning that you are looking for. And for some, you could walk through life feeling intellectually lost or pessimistic because of this, which is a large burden to carry. And so, Saturn is really forcing you to build by first realizing that you have to write your own textbook on life. And you actually have the tools to do so. Your mission really is to solidify wisdom rather than just collecting experiences. And you don't need to find just one truth, or you don't always need to be happy or optimistic. You just need to live by a guiding principle that always keeps yourself open while establishing what you do believe in. So the restriction is there to strip away the fluff and the things that offer you nothing so that you can find a truth that really resonates with you. And with this, you can build a worldview that is practical, tested, resilient, and most importantly, a sense of faith that does not get shattered when life gets hard. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has built a philosophy or a sense of adventure, or maybe a system of knowledge that is so structurally sound that it can guide others through the dark. And you don't need a guru to tell you all the answers, nor do you need to run away to find God, however you define God, whether it's a universal force, whether it's within yourself or an actual deity. And once you work on this wisdom, however that looks, your voice will be colored with an authority and a faith that turns belief into law and that really helps you expand your horizons. Saturn in Capricorn can specifically put a restriction of your practical, security-focused, and results-oriented nature. You could feel heavy gravity regarding your competence and your ability to achieve, and this could stem from a feeling that you were born old and carrying this crushing standard of excellence on your shoulders since you were a child. And this may have been impossible to meet, regardless of how heavy the weight was to carry. Like, it could feel like you carried a lot of weight that resulted in nothing, and it could feel like the universe acts as a strict boss that denies you the overnight success or the easy path that others seem to walk, really forcing you to earn every inch of your progress. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of time itself, feeling like you are constantly behind schedule even when you are ahead of everybody else. You could feel a heaviness in your shoulders and knees where you physically bear the load of your relationship with progress. And in some cases, you could feel that love and acceptance are only granted when you are doing something measurable, forcing you to equate your human worth with what you can actually build. And Saturn puts a delay on your satisfaction. It forces you to suppress your emotions to get the job done, or it forces you to climb the mountain without any ropes in order to embody a success that is built on an unbreakable sense of integrity and a determination to put one foot in front of the other. And this weight is particularly potent because Capricorn is ruled by Saturn itself, the planet of structure and mastery. But here the planet is in its own sign, and it doubles down on the demand that you take full responsibility for your own authority and really build something based on tangible achievement and working and taking the steps to do so. And through whatever you master in life, you can hone in your natural Saturnian capability and really transform a feeling of heavy burden into a legacy of authority that truly stands the test of time. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming paralyzed by ambition or comparison or a deep fear of failure, however failure looks to you. And you could refuse to take the first step because the mountain looks so high, but also you risk not looking good enough. And this could be simply too painful for you. Or you could risk not feeling enough, which could be painful. Or you could swing the other way and become the tyrant who is so obsessed with status or control that you lose your humanity, including the humanity to yourself in the process. And you risk becoming somebody who looks at successful people, however that looks for you, with bitter envy while refusing to do the grunt work yourself. And you could feel trapped in a cynical sense of discouragement. And for some, you could walk through life feeling a heavy and burdened energy because of this, which is often too large of a burden for you to carry by yourself. So you must refine it. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first accepting the responsibility of your own power. Your mission is to build an empire, however that looks for you, rather than just chasing a little title that really means nothing. And the restriction is there to teach you the laws of the process and the power of sequence, taking one step at a time. And so you can build structures or lifestyles or businesses or institutions or a sense of self that can outlast you. Although I don't know how you can outlast yourself. Maybe you're a role model in some way. I don't know, but take what resonates with you. And you are meant to develop like this authority that is truly built from scratch. You have to build it yourself. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has built a way of systematically building. Like you are the builder of building, if that makes sense. And this could be so unshakable if you do this right because it was built brick by brick. You made sure the foundation was solid with total discipline. It has no shortcuts and you don't need applause to keep working, nor do you need to cut corners to get to the top. And once you are willing to put in this work to learn how to take things one step at a time, however that looks, your name will be flavored with this respect and a dignity that is truly unshakable no matter what the world throws at you. Saturn in Aquarius can specifically put a restriction of your nature that wants to walk to the beat of its own drum, to be innovative, and to use that detached outside point of view to have sudden insights and to actually build something from it. And you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your vision in some way, and this could stem from a deep sense of maybe isolation. Maybe you feel like an alien looking in on the human experience, but you never quite belong in it. Or it could just feel like the universe blocks you from finding your larger mission in some way, really forcing you to stand alone in your own unique vision while everybody else gets to blend in effortlessly. Or you could simply feel this heavy weight of being ahead of your time, and you could have so many brilliant ideas that nobody understands yet, or maybe you don't even know how to communicate it, and this could create this static in your nervous system or a coldness in your ankles as you feel really disconnected from the ground beneath you. And in some cases, you could feel silenced by society in some way, really feeling like you have to dilute your ideas just to be invited to the table. And Saturn really puts a delay on your social or societal acceptance, but also a trust in your vision. This is going to be key here. It really forces you to translate your ideas into human language carefully, or it forces you to build your own way of doing things completely from scratch in order to really embody a vision that actually values your unique mind. And the restriction here exists because Aquarius is traditionally ruled by Saturn, but modernly it's ruled by Uranus, which really combines the need for order with the urge for progress. And Saturn is rigorously testing your forward-thinking vision to ensure that your ideas for the future are systems that can actually function within reality. And through this mastery, you can really refine the combined energies of Saturn and Uranus, really allowing you to turn the abstract ideas or the rebellion that you have into functional innovation that could genuinely restructure the world around you or just restructure your own world, which is equally as important. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you do risk becoming a rebel without a cause, because you could become contrarian who disagrees with everything as a result of the bitterness of not knowing how to bring your vision to life. Or you could become a utopian dreamer who talks about saving the world but can't manage their own daily life because the reality you live in is not really in touch with the reality you can see. Or you also risk becoming somebody who really floats on the fringes of society, judging everybody else as a sheep while you remain disconnected and ineffective. And for some, you could walk through life feeling misunderstood and isolated because of this, which is such a tough energy to have to carry around. And so, because of this, Saturn is really forcing you to build by first grounding your lightning almost. So instead of letting the fire or the lava flow, you have to turn it into a metaphorical lava lamp. You have to kind of contain your crazy ideas and figure out how to build with it. And your mission is to become the architect of the future rather than just an outsider looking in, fearing that there's no place for your vision. And the restriction is there to really force you to pass your ideas through a stress test. And so you can build systems or networks or communities, whatever you're trying to build, because it'll depend on where your Saturn is, that actually work in reality, not just in theory. And most importantly, it is here to help you build a sense of belonging that is based on a shared vision that would actually benefit humanity or yourself, as opposed to aiming just to fit in. And you are meant to develop your innovative structures in a way that is truly built from the ground up. Like, you got to be the one to put the first stone down. And by the time you mature, you could become the person who doesn't just complain about the old rules, but you will write the new ones. This is a great placement for Saturn, and you will stand behind them no matter what, because you don't need to conform or change the world, nor do you need permission to bring your vision to life. And once you work on this vision, however that looks, your ideas will have this brilliance and usefulness that can really shift the paradigm for whatever it is that you're trying to build. Saturn in Pisces can specifically put a restriction of your energetic or creative sponge nature, the nature of yourself that is kind of creative, empathetic, and open yet compassionate. And so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your boundaries, your energetic walls, and in some cases, your spiritual health. And this could stem from feeling overwhelmed by the suffering of the world, as if you have no skin to protect you from the atmosphere. And it could feel like the universe almost forces you to confront the harsh, cold realities of life, denying you the ability to just float away into your fantasies, as the reality you have lived in, maybe for some reason throughout your life, didn't really give room for you to be a dreamer. Or you could just simply feel a heavy weight of confusion and feel like you are constantly walking through this foggy path where nothing is clear. And this could create like this heaviness in your feet or your lymphatic system, or a feeling of being constantly drained and exhausted by forces outside of yourself. And in some cases, you could feel isolated in your suffering, or it could feel like you are absorbing everybody else's energetic burdens because you don't know how to say no. And Saturn puts a delay on your escapism. It really forces you to build a protective fence for your energy, or it forces you to give tangible form for your imagination in order to really embody a spirituality or a sense of wanderlust or an ability to dream that is actually stable and rooted in reality. And this heavy gravity will exist because Pisces is traditionally ruled by Jupiter and modernly ruled by Neptune, which are planets that rule over the boundless nature of the spirit. And Saturn is placing necessary limits on the vastness to really force you to give tangible form to your intuition and your empathy. And it's through this mastery that you can hone in on the vast energies of Jupiter and Neptune, potentially giving your dreams the structure they need to actually become reality. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you really do risk drowning, as the energy of the world can be overwhelming. So for some, maybe you fall into addiction, excessive sleep, maybe you play the victim and you use your sensitivity as an outlet to check out of life because the world feels too harsh, because you are almost too aware of how harsh life can be. Or you could become someone who drifts in a haze of confusion and lost potential, constantly waiting for a saving moment or a person who never comes, and you risk becoming someone who feels feels weak and almost too open, leaking energy everywhere you go and also absorbing too much. And for some, you could walk through life feeling lost or invisible because of this, which is a really tough thing to deal with. And so Saturn here is forcing you to build by first making the invisible visible. Your mission is to manifest the spirit and the dreamlike vision that resonates with your soul rather than dissolving into it and being consumed by it. And the restriction is there to teach you that compassion requires structure to be effective. And so you can take your empathy, your vision, and your creativity and build an outlet for it, like an art or a healing practice, maybe a charity, or most importantly, you can build a sense of resilience that really allows you to feel as freely as possible without breaking. And you can dream of a better world, or you can dream of doing something that makes your magic and your wanderlust almost feel full, because you are meant to develop a magic that is truly built from scratch and to make something with that magic. And by the time you mature, you are the person who stops being a sponge that just absorbs, and you start being a force that directs the water and the energy wherever it is needed, because you don't need to dissolve to be in touch with the soft side of life, nor do you need to be a victim to be kind and tap into compassion. And once you work on this dream, however that looks, it will depend on the house Saturn is in, which I do have a forecast for, which you will probably watch after this. Your life will be colored with almost this compassion that heals the world and the energy around you without destroying you in the process. So Saturn in the first house is the specific restriction of yourself, your identity, and your appearance. And you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your physical body or how you present yourself to the world. And this could stem from a rejection or restriction that was placed on your very essence. And it could feel like the universe is working against you in some way, or you could feel simply the heavy weight of the world falling on your shoulders. And if everything crumbles, it almost feels like it's your weight to bear. And somatically, this can feel like wearing a heavy cloak or suit of armor that is slightly too big for you, and you might feel watched or scrutinized simply for existing. Or you could struggle with a feeling of heaviness or inhibition when you walk into a room, and in some cases, it could feel like you have to be the responsible one or the adult who has to watch every move that they make. And Saturn really puts a delay on your ability to just spontaneously be yourself. It forces you to calculate your movements and your image carefully, or it forces you to build an image of yourself from scratch in order to reap a sense of self that you actually find rewarding. And so if you shrink away from this pressure, you do risk becoming invisible, or you risk losing touch with a sense of self that you also want to own with pride. And you could dilute your personality to be just as palatable and unthreatening as possible, because the weight of being seen feels too dangerous. Or you could force yourself to wear a mask that's a bit too heavy and constricts you of the freedom that you crave. And you risk becoming a ghost in your own life, or somebody who lets others or outside circumstances define who you are because you are too afraid to define yourself. You walk through life apologetically, which could be a lot of weight to carry. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first looking in the mirror instead of avoiding it. And your mission is to construct an identity that is solid, respectable, and undeniably yours. The restriction is there to strip away the superficial layers of your personality so only the truth remains, and so you can build a sense of self and identity, a body, or a sense of confidence that you can own with pride, which will only come from the work of customizing what type of person you want to be. And you are meant to develop a bravado, and by the time you mature, you are the person who commands respect simply by walking into a room, and you don't need to be loud to be noticed, nor do you need to carry the weight of the world, because it was forced upon you at different stages in your life. And so once you work on this identity, no matter how that looks, it will be colored with a stability that even the world cannot shake. Saturn in the second house is the specific restriction of your possessions, what you own, your self-esteem, and your values, and you could feel a heavy anxiety regarding your survival, or a nagging sense that resources are scarce and hard to keep, even if you actually have plenty. And the restriction might stem from early experiences where stability was conditional, or where you felt you weren't worthy of having nice things unless you bled for them. And it could feel like the universe has put a specific price tag on your peace, one that is higher than everybody else's. Or you could simply feel like the ground beneath you is constantly shifting, forcing you to grip onto what you have with tight hands and making what you do earn feel blocked from an easy flow. And somatically, this could manifest as a tightness in your chest or shallow breath or a physical bracing against a loss that hasn't happened yet. And in some cases, you could feel paralyzed by the idea of spending money on yourself as if enjoying things feels like a crime. And Saturn puts a restriction on your ability to just receive. It really forces you to monitor every dollar and every value system carefully, or it forces you to build your self-worth from the ground up, independent of what you own, in order to reap a sense of value that isn't tied to what you can lose. If you shrink away from this pressure, you really risk living in a permanent state of scarcity regardless of your wealth. You could hoard your money, maybe your talents, or even check your self-worth constantly, refusing to invest in yourself because the risk feels too terrifying. Or you could swing in the other extreme and spend recklessly to soothe the anxiety, trying to buy a feeling of safety that never really sticks. Or you risk becoming somebody who doesn't actually own their life, but is just guarding it. Or you could be somebody who bases their entire human value on a number that fluctuates, really leaving your self-esteem constantly vulnerable to the market. And you could walk through life feeling poor in spirit, which is a heavy slack that you have to carry. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first redefining what value actually means to you. And your mission is to construct a sense of security that is solid, tangible, and undeniably yours. The restriction is there to strip away the reliance on luck or handouts so that you can learn how to generate your own stability. And you are meant to be a builder because you can master every resource on your own, whether that is time, money, energy, or the skills and values that you have. And by the time you mature, you are the person who understands the mechanics of resource management and worth better than everybody else because you have earned it the hard way. You don't need to fear the market crashing because you know you have the skills to rebuild and adapt to it. And once you do this work, your self-esteem will be colored with the solidity that no force on this earth can ever take away. Saturn in the third house is a specific restriction on your communication, your mental patterns, and maybe your local environment. So you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your intelligence or your ability to be understood. And this restriction could stem from feeling silenced either in your early schooling, maybe your early life, or feeling like the slow one in a fast-paced environment. And it could feel like there's a heavy filter between your brain and your mouth, making you rehearse everything 10 times before you dare to speak. Or you could feel like you are struggling with a feeling of isolation, even among your immediate environment in some way. And you could feel like an outsider, even in places that are meant to be second nature to you. And somatically, this could feel like a literal blockage in your throat or a mental fog that descends right when you need to be sharp. And in some cases, you could feel like your words are constantly being graded by an invisible teacher, really forcing you to stay silent rather than risk being in the wrong. And Saturn puts a delay on your ability to just spontaneously say what's on your mind. And it forces you to weigh the words and the structure of your thoughts carefully, or it forces you to build your intellectual confidence from scratch in order to reap a voice that you can actually trust. If you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming voiceless and you could retreat into silence, letting others speak for you because the weight of being misunderstood feels too painful. Or you could mask your insecurity with superficial chatter that says absolutely nothing and be very terrified of diving deep and being rejected or judged for it. Or you risk becoming a ghost in conversations or in your own mind, or somebody who consumes information endlessly but never shares their wisdom because they don't believe it has value. And you could walk through life feeling intellectually small or like you're always missing the punchline, which is a very lonely way to exist. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first learning to trust the mechanics of your own mind, but you must first understand your mind and then build a structure for it that allows your thoughts and words to filter properly. And your mission is to construct a voice that is authoritative, clear, and undeniably impactful. The restriction is there to force you to verify your facts and your chosen words with precision so that when you do speak or you have an idea, it really lands and you are meant to develop mental excellence. And by the time you mature, you are the person who really commands a room not by shouting, but by speaking the truth, no matter what that truth looks like. And you don't need to fill silence or operate like others in order to be smart or valuable. And once you work on your voice and your mindset, however that looks, your words will be colored with a weight and wisdom that makes everyone else stop and listen. Saturn in the fourth house is the specific restriction of your home, your roots, or maybe your innermost self, and you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your private life or your family history. And this could stem from a childhood environment that maybe felt cold, overly responsible, or where you had to grow up way too fast. It could also feel like the universe denied you the safety of a soft place to land, or it could simply feel like there's this heavy weight of generational baggage really falling on your shoulders, and it feels like you are the one carrying the emotional debt of your ancestors or your family, which could make grounding feel impossible. And somatically, this can manifest as a deep guarded tension in the stomach or the chest, which are the centers for emotional safety in your body, or like you're physically bracing for impact even when you're trying to chill. And in some cases, you could feel like a stranger in your own lineage, or like you have to earn your seat at the dinner table. And it can feel like you're being held back from a simple and safe life, and that can give you confusion as to why you can't have it. Like, why can't I have it? And Saturn really puts a delay on your ability to relax and feel at home, and it forces you to guard your private world carefully, or it could force you to build a sense of family or innermost safety from scratch in order to reap a safe haven that actually feels grounded and safe to you. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming emotionally unrooted. You could move from city to city or house to house, really constantly looking for a feeling of home that you'll never find because you're looking for it outside of yourself. Or you could build walls so high, both internally and externally, that they become a prison, really isolating yourself in a fortress of independence because the risk of letting someone in feels too dangerous. And you could become a ghost in your own home or with your own family, or someone who denies themselves comfort because they associate safety with burden as if it's impossible to gain. And you walk through life feeling like an orphan in spirit, which is a very heavy emptiness to have to carry. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first defining what safety actually looks like for you, not what it looks like for your parents, and not dependent on the circumstances of your early life, which were most likely outside of your control. And your mission is to be the architect of your own safety, your own lineage, and your inner and outer home. And the restriction is there to force you to decide that the generational trauma stops with you, like breaking out of the matrix so that you can build a foundation that is solid, supportive, and undeniably yours. And by the time you mature, you are the person who provides the stability for everyone else because you had to manufacture yourself from scratch, and you don't need to inherit a perfect family or the right emotional grounding to have this. And once you work on this foundation, however that looks, your private life will be colored with a peace and security that the outside world absolutely cannot shake. Saturn in the fifth house is the specific restriction of your creative output, maybe your inner child in some way, your ability to take risks, and the act of pleasure itself. And in some people, it could be maybe a restriction on your relationship to children. And you could feel a heavy gravity regarding the concept of play. And this could stem from a feeling that you aren't allowed to just enjoy yourself without a productive purpose attached to it, or like you feel like you are being blocked from joy in some way. And it could feel like the universe is really putting a tax on your free time, making it so that every time you try to relax or pursue a hobby, something serious interrupts you, or you find a wave of guilt for being idle, or you could simply feel a heavy weight of expectation regarding maybe children or your artistic creations. Take what resonates with this, and this could feel like anything you birth into the world has to be a masterpiece, or it has to be worth something, or it's not worth doing at all. And somatically, this can feel like a blockage in your chest or heart center when you try to be spontaneous, as if your body doesn't know how to let go of control. And in some cases, you could feel that luck is something that other people have while you have to work twice as hard just to get a seat at the table of joy. And then Saturn really puts a delay on your ability to gamble, and it doesn't like being a beginner at anything, and it really forces you to structure your leisure and creative projects carefully, or it could force you to treat your inner child with the seriousness of an adult in order to create a sense of fun that is earned rather than fleeting. If you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming joyless or barren in your output, and you could refuse to have children. Maybe you can't have children for some reason. Maybe you refuse to start the art project or go on the date because you really fear that surrendering could harm your inner child in some way or crush your joy, really sterilizing your own potential. And maybe when you do pursue these things, you reject yourself from feeling that joy as a source of unknown guilt comes to you. Or you could swing the other way and treat fun as like this numbing agent, engaging in vices or distractions as a rigid habitual way to escape the pressure of your own life, and you risk becoming a spectator who watches others live vibrantly while you have to stay safe on the sidelines, criticizing the lighthearted nature of others to protect yourself from your own desire to play. And you could walk through life feeling gray and muted because of this, which is a tough way to live. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first accepting that joy is a serious requirement for a life well lived. It's not optional. And your mission is to really turn your creative impulse into something that is safe to express. And in a lot of cases, that means turning your joy into something that will last or potentially have impact. The restriction is there to teach you that true art and true happiness and true childlike joy requires effort or discipline, giving you the stamina to master a craft and joy while others are just dabbling in it and not taking it seriously. And you are meant to be a master creator no matter what it is that you create. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has built something tangible, whether that's a well-raised family, maybe a complete novel, a solidified talent, or just like this unbreakable childlike joy that can withstand the test of time. And you don't need to be lucky to be successful, nor do you need to have permission to enjoy the things in life. And once you work on this expression, however that looks, your creations will be colored with a durability and a quality that commands respect and helps you tap into that inner child once again. Saturn in the 6th house is the specific restriction of your work, your daily routines, maybe your physical functionality, and perhaps service to others in some cases. And so you could feel heavy gravity regarding the maintenance of your life. And this could stem from a physical constitution that is very sensitive or requires strict management just to feel normal. And it could feel like the universe has either handed you a body or a job that has no autopilot setting, really forcing you to be hyper aware of your energy levels, your diet, or your schedule, while everybody else gets to function effortlessly or eat junk food or have little sleep and they don't have to deal with what you have to deal with. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of obligation in your daily work, even if the rest doesn't resonate, and you could feel like you are a bearer of burden who carries the load for the entire world. And somatically, this can manifest as digestive issues, skin flare-ups, maybe chronic fatigue. And this is kind of immediate physical feedback that tells you when you have stepped out of line in some ways, but in other ways, you could just feel enslaved by your to-do list and terrified that if you miss one task, your whole system will collapse. And Saturn puts a delay on your vitality. It really forces you to check on your habits and your work ethic carefully, or it forces you to build a lifestyle from scratch that actually supports your specific biology in order to reap a health span or work habits or a day-to-day life that is sustainable. If you shrink away from this pressure, you risk systematic breakdown, and you could ignore the creaks in the machine until they become a full-blown crisis, really disassociating from your body because the maintenance feel like too much work. Or you could become a hypochondriac who is so obsessed with fixing yourself that you never actually live, and you risk becoming a servant to your own life, really trapped in a cycle of drudgery where your work is very hard, you work very hard, but you never seem to get ahead or feel well, and you could burn out very easily, and you could walk through life feeling constantly exhausted and behind schedule, which creates a drag on everything else that you try to achieve, and it puts limits on how you complete tasks and your work, which can restrict how you experience the mundane life. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first respecting the limits of your body, your energy levels, and how you give service. And your mission is to perfect the ritual of daily life. The restriction is there to force you to engineer a routine that actually works for you, both in method and effectiveness, really turning discipline from a punishment into a tool for longevity and productivity. And you are meant to be a master of efficiency. And by the time you mature, you can be the person who has hacked the code of productivity and health in your own way, operating with a rhythm that looks boring to others but yields incredible results. And you don't need to burn out to be useful. You don't need to push yourself super hard, nor do you need to suffer to be of service. And once you work on this routine, however that looks, your work will be colored with a reliability and competence that makes you indispensable, but also way more productive than you could have ever imagined. Saturn in the seventh house really puts a specific restriction of your committed partnerships, maybe your contracts, and how you view yourself through the lens of others. It's how you really connect to anything outside of yourself. And you could feel heavy gravity regarding one-on-one bonds. And this could stem from a feeling that relationships or bonds are really heavy responsibilities rather than escapes, and they can feel hard to achieve in a way that matches your vision. Or it could feel like the universe really denies you the easy breezy flings or connections that others enjoy, really delivering you partners or connections that really force you to grow up within the connection by making the atmosphere of connection feel a little bit serious. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight of loneliness and feel like there's a wall between you and others that makes true connection difficult. Or you could feel like you always end up carrying the burden of the relationship structure. And somatically, this can manifest as a defensive posture or a draining of your social battery so easily the moment that you have to compromise or negotiate with somebody else. And in some cases, you could face legal or binding obligations where contracts with others become sources of stress. This won't apply to everybody. And Saturn really puts a delay on your ability to connect easily and without stress, and it forces you to vet your connections and your promises carefully, or it forces you to learn how to stand alone with dignity in order to reap potential connection in the future that is built on rock rather than just quicksand. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you could risk isolation or entrapment, and you could become somebody who stays in a miserable arrangement simply because you said you would, or because you fear the loneliness that separation could bring, honoring the contract of a bond over the humanized part of it. Or you could avoid commitment entirely to escape the burden of another person, really convinced that you are better off alone, as this could be less constricting. Or you could be somebody who is very isolating, even with friendships. Maybe you don't feel like you can easily connect with others, and you risk becoming a lost soul in your own relationships, present in the body but almost walled off in spirit. Or you could be someone who views every connection as a potential liability, and you're very suspicious of other people, and you could walk through life really defending your territory so fiercely that no one can ever get close enough to help you, which could be a very lonely way to exist. Or you could close the doors on those who carry the weight for you because you are afraid of putting yourself out there. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first learning the weight of a vow, but also learning what it is that you actually need from another to keep your soul intact, how to not, sell yourself away. And the restriction is there to teach you that connection is a living structure that must be built. And this gives you the wisdom to choose partners or connections who can actually handle the weight of life with you. But they will hand you the reins to figure out how you want to build that, because they won't try to control things, and it'll be a 50-50 give and take. And you can learn to be a master of commitment and connection. And by the time you mature, you could be the person who offers the most security in a connection because you do not commit lightly, whether platonic or romantic. But when you do, it is unbreakable, and you don't need to be a fairy tale to be happy, nor do you need to carry all of the weight alone. And it's once you learn to work how to relate to others, however that looks, that your partnerships will be colored with a structure and endurance that is truly unbreakable. Saturn in the 8th house is the specific restriction of maybe shared resources, debt, the psychological depths of life and death, and the entanglement of your life with others or outside forces. And so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding what you owe and what is owed to you, whether materially, intimately, energetically, or psychologically. And this can stem from a fear of losing your autonomy if you surrender to outside forces. It could feel like the universe blocks you from easy access to helpful shared resources, such as grants, loans, inheritances, or even emotional support, forcing you to pay the full price for everything that you get. Or you could simply feel a heavy weight regarding the finite nature of things, feeling the looming presence of death, taxes, or endings more potently than everybody else around you. Maybe you've had to face the harsh realities of relying on yourself, or the harsh realities of what trouble surrender could bring. And somatically, this can manifest as a clamping down in the gut or the pelvic floor, like a survivalist bracing against the vulnerability of needing anybody. And in some cases, you could feel paralyzed by the idea of entanglements, terrified that exchanging anything gives someone else power over you. And Saturn really puts a lid on your ability to be rescued. and it forces you to navigate the complex web of emotional and financial entanglements carefully, or it forces you to build your own resources from scratch in order to reap a sense of security that is totally self-sufficient. If you shrink away from this pressure, you really risk living in a scarcity mindset where trust and surrender cannot be given away, and you can hoard your resources or your emotions, really refusing to share with an outside force because you are terrified of being drained and losing your power. Or you could be the type who really, avoids looking at the dark parts of life and avoid necessary conversations about deep and potentially psychological wounds until they fester and kind of boil over. And you could also risk becoming somebody who lives on the surface because the depths feel too dangerous. Or you could be somebody who is constantly anxious about ruin, as you know what surrender can bring, and you could walk through life with a clenched fist, unable to receive intimacy or support even when it is you that is drowning. And so Saturn is really forcing you to build by first stripping away your reliance on external power. And your mission is to learn to surrender in a way that does not give away your autonomy. And the restriction is there to ensure that you are solid enough to handle the inevitable crises of life, turning your fear into the unknown into a strategic mastery of it, and turning you into somebody who has the structure for resilience. And you are meant to be the person who can handle the estate or the grief and the shared resources without flinching. And by the time you mature, you are the rock that others can cling to when their world falls apart, because you have already made peace with the heavy parts of life, and you don't need to fear the end, nor do you need to control everything to be safe. And once you work on this internal power, however that looks, your presence will be colored with a psychological stability that is truly unshakable no matter what happens in your life. Saturn in the 9th house is the specific restriction of your beliefs, your expansion, and your view of the horizon. I actually have this placement as well, and so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your worldview, maybe your education. And this really could stem from a rigid or religious upbringing where you weren't allowed to question the rules, or a feeling that the world is a small limiting place rather than a vast adventure. Or it could feel like the universe puts roadblocks up every time you try to travel or expand your mind, really forcing you to stay put and deal with reality while you watch others fly and expand their horizons freely. I can resonate with this a lot because I didn't actually get to travel to another country until recently. And so you could also simply feel the heavy weight of needing proof for everything, really unable to just have faith that things will work out without seeing the receipt first. And somatically, this could feel like a heaviness in the hips and legs, or the parts of the body designed for movement, as if you're walking through mud while everybody else is running. And in some cases, you could feel a crisis of meaning, feeling like you are staring at the blank sky, waiting for a sign that never comes. And Saturn is putting a delay on your ability to just blindly believe. It forces you to test your philosophy against the hard rock of reality in order to reap a wisdom that actually holds up under pressure. And so if you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming dogmatic or pessimistic about what it is that you believe, and you could cling to a rigid set of rules or a guru simply because it provides a feeling of safety, and you could refuse to question anything because the void feels too scary. Or you could become a perpetual wonderer who knows a little bit about a lot of things but really believes in nothing, and you could float from one idea to the next without ever landing on a truth, as you have a fear that this established truth could be proven wrong, maybe it's rejected, which could really challenge your sense of meaning. And you could risk becoming a ghost in your own expansive and spiritual journey, preaching freedom while living in a mental cage of your own making. And you could walk through life feeling intellectually lost, or like an imposter in the halls of wisdom. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first writing your own textbook of life and not needing for it to necessarily be perfect at first. And your mission is to solidify wisdom. The restriction is there to strip away what does not matter so that you can actually find a truth that works for you, not one that was handed to you. And you are meant to embody the true definition of wisdom. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has built a philosophy, a system of knowledge, or a worldview that is so structurally sound in your own life that it can guide others and yourself through the dark. And you don't need to borrow someone else's faith, nor do you need to run away to find meaning. And once you work on this wisdom, however that looks, your perspective will be colored with an authority and this sense of clarity that turns belief into the law of your life. Saturn in the 10th house is the specific restriction of your career, your public image, and fundamentally how you approach ambition and achievement. And you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your drive to succeed. And this could stem from a deep-seated feeling that making it is a duty that you have to do to survive rather than just a goal that you get to enjoy. And it could feel like the universe acts as this strict gatekeeper to your aspirations or success, really denying you the shortcuts or the lucky breaks that other people seem to stumble into, really forcing you to earn every single inch of your progress. Or you could simply feel a crushing weight of expectation, feeling like your achievements are the only thing that justifies your space in the world, which makes the very idea of trying feel exhausting. And somatically, this can manifest as a physical heaviness on the shoulders, as if you are literally carrying the sky, or stiffness in the knees when you try to climb. And in some cases, you could feel massive imposter syndrome, feeling like a child wearing a parent's business suit, almost really waiting to be exposed as a fraud the moment you reach something more or something bigger. And Saturn puts a delay on the gratification of achievement, and it forces you to start at the very bottom of the ladder and whatever it is that you're pursuing and to climb every single rung, or it forces you to restructure your entire relationship with success in order to reap a legacy that can actually hold the weight of your ambition and satisfy you. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you do risk becoming paralyzed by the fear of failure, and you could refuse to even try to pursue your ambitions because the standard that you set for yourself is way too high, deciding that it's safer to be a potential genius rather than a failed one. Or you could swing the other way and become a tyrant who's obsessed with titles or status and the appearance of power to really mask a deep feeling of inadequacy, and you risk becoming a ghost in your own profession or someone who chases the applause instead of the deep impact that you can bring, really building a tower of cards that collapses the moment that the wind blows because you think it's the only way to reach the top of the ladder. And you could walk through life feeling small and insignificant, or like you constantly need to prove your existence by what you do, which is an exhausting way to live. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first accepting that you are the CEO of your own life and that your ambition is a tool. And so your mission really is to build something that is truly yours. The restriction is there to ensure that your reputation is built super solid so that when you do finally reach the top, you can stay there. And you are meant to be an authority whether you want to be or not. Maybe you reject that idea, and that's why this Saturn placement is here. And by the time you mature, you are the person who can really command respect, not because you demanded it, but because you have a track record of integrity or mastery that is undeniable. And you don't need to fake it until you make it, nor do you need to burn yourself out to be worthy. And once you work on this, however that looks, your name will be colored with respect and a dignity that can outlast you. Saturn in the 11th is the specific restriction on your community, your groups, maybe your larger dreams, and the resources required to build your vision or your role in society. And so you could feel a heavy gravity regarding your social groups or society, often feeling like an outsider looking in. And this could stem from early experiences of exclusion or feeling like you just didn't speak the same language as your peers. Or it could feel like the universe places a wall of glass between you and the crowd, really making it hard for you to just naturally fit in or to find a network that supports your goals. Or you could simply feel the heavy weight of the future itself, feeling like your dreams are so big that they are burdensome, or like you lack the social capital and resources to actually make them real. And somatically, this can feel like a coldness or a stiffening of the body whenever you enter a collective space. It could be on social media as well. Or maybe you have a nervous system freeze response because you don't feel safe in the herd. And in some cases, you could feel burdened by the state of the world, feeling personal responsibility to fix society or organize a group, which could make friendship and networking feel like hard labor. And Saturn puts a delay on your ability to find your cause. It forces you to vet your circle carefully, or it forces you to build your own community and resources from scratch in order to reap a sense of belonging that is based on shared purpose, not just proximity. And if you shrink away from this pressure, you risk becoming the lone wolf or the cynic or the one who views society as hopeless. And you could reject society or groups or your higher aspirations entirely, convincing yourself that you don't need anybody because you are terrified of the rejection and realities that come with it, protecting yourself almost with this shield that separates you from the world. Or it could look like you may be becoming a social climber who uses people as stepping stones, engaging in superficial networking that leaves you feeling empty and used, and you risk becoming a ghost in your own community, really drifting on the fringes of movements and groups, never really truly belonging or never contributing anything substantial. And you could walk through life feeling like an alien or like a visionary with big dreams, but no team to help you build them, which is a very lonely path to walk. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first taking your hopes and wishes seriously. And your mission is to really build a future that resonates with you. And the restriction is there to force you to translate your vision into something tangible, teaching you that a movement requires structure and resources to actually survive. And you are meant to organize a revolution, whether it's a personal revolution or a larger scale one. And by the time you mature, you can be the person who has built a system, a network, or a community that actually works in reality, not just in theory. Or you could be part of the movement that brings this vision to life in some way, because you do not need to fit in to belong, nor do you need to wait for an invitation to change the world. And once you work on this connection to society, however that looks, your contributions and your visions can be shaped in a way that brings you purpose and brings you community in a way that can withstand the test of time and circumstance. Saturn in the 12th house is the specific restriction of your subconscious, your spirituality, and maybe the hidden parts of your mind. And so you could feel a heavy haunting gravity that you can't quite identify. And this could stem from a feeling of deep isolation or carrying the weight of family secrets or collective sorrow that isn't even yours. And it could feel like the universe has placed you in a room that nobody else can see. And it really forces you to deal with your mental health or your inner demons in a private way while everybody else thinks you're fine. Or maybe it just forces you to be in this room alone almost, and while everybody else gets to embrace connection, or that could be what it feels like. Or you could just simply feel the heavy weight of the void, or feel overwhelmed by how much suffering exists in the world, and you are unable to filter that out for some reason, as if you have no skin, or as if peace is unattainable. And somatically, this could manifest as chronic fatigue, maybe heaviness in the feet, or a feeling of being drained and foggy, as if you were trying to build a house in the middle of the ocean. And in some cases, you could feel like you are your own worst enemy, really self-sabotaging whenever you get close to success because of the subconscious fear that is running the show. And Saturn could put a lid on your escapism, and it forces you to confront your shadows and fears directly, or it forces you to build a structure for your spirituality in order to reap a peace of mind that is actually stable. And so if you shrink away from this pressure, you risk drowning, because you could fall into a trap of addiction, excessive sleep, or you could get stuck in thought loops or simply denial, really trying to numb the noise of your own subconscious because looking at it feels inaccessible. Or you could become the eternal outsider, really waiting for a saving force to rescue you from a prison that is unlocked from the inside, as if you are confused on how you can deal with this limit, and you risk becoming a ghost in the real world, drifting through life in almost this haze and constantly absorbing the world around you because you don't know how to build the psychic boundaries needed to keep yourself safe. And you could walk through life feeling like your mind is a trap, or like you're disconnected from the world as an outsider, which can be terrifying, isolating, and really tough. And so Saturn is forcing you to build by first making the invisible visible and grounding it in the real world. And your mission is to manifest the spirit and come up with a creative way to pull your shadows into the realm of light. And the restriction is there to teach you that your intuition, your connection to the unseen, and likely your empathy are the tools that need an outlet to be unearthed and channeled directly. And you are meant to be a bridge builder between the dream world and the real world. And by the time you mature, you are the person who has taken your pain, your dreams, or your spiritual gifts, and you've built something real with them, like a healing practice, a hospital, a platform, a masterpiece of art, or even just a sense of connectedness that no longer feels isolating, but instead it transcends. And you do not need to fear the unknown, nor do you need to be a martyr to be of use and connected to the world. And once you work on this inner world, however that looks, your spirit will be colored with the wisdom and resilience that can survive even the darkest night. When the ruler of Saturn is in Aries, the way you actually process limitations or heavy responsibility, it's very instinctual and fast-paced, and instead of sitting there and letting pressure weigh you down, you sort of need to treat your challenges like a sprint where you just rip the band-aid off and get it over with. And the mechanics here are all about momentum, so if you try to overplan or wait for the perfect time to deal with a burden, you're just going to feel restless or feel this agitated heat building up in your body because your system is designed to burn through obstacles with a quick spark of energy rather than slow methodical plotting. And you channel this energy by giving yourself permission to be the first mover, which basically means that you need to stop asking for permission and just start doing the things that scare you. And the best outlet for your Saturn stress is usually physical action or a brave decision that cuts through the noise, because you need to feel like you are fighting back against whatever's holding you down. And this will align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it specifically means that your relief comes from the adrenaline of the start, and you clear the blockage by doing something bold, independent, and maybe a little bit impulsive just to get the wheels turning again. And when you feel like you aren't using this energy well, it usually looks like you're picking fights with authority figures, or maybe you're getting super frustrated and you're very burnout prone because you're trying to rush through things that actually require you to take your time. But when you are in alignment, you look like the person who is brave enough to tackle the elephant in the room while everybody else is still scared to look at it. And you're not reckless, you're just very decisive, and you can use that Aries drive to punch through walls that would normally keep people stuck for years. And so to get the most out of this placement, you really just have to trust your gut impulse to act when things get hard. And instead of freezing up when Saturn puts pressure on you, try to move your body or make simplified direct choices to change your circumstances immediately. And your mastery really comes from realizing that you don't need a 10-year plan to be successful. You just need the courage to take the very first step, and the rest will usually figure itself out. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the sign of Taurus, your mechanism for dealing with life's harder lessons is very slow, it's very grounded, and it can be a very physical experience, because you're not just built to rush through your growth or deal with abstract, hypothetical worries. You really need to feel like you're building something solid that you can actually touch or see, or at the very least experience, even if it's on the spiritual side. And the heavy energy of Saturn is kind of processed best here when you are able to slow your life down and crawl and focus on the simple sensory details of your reality or whatever issues you're having. Because if you get rushed or forced into a chaotic environment, you'll likely dig your heels in and refuse to move at all, which could stifle your progress. And you channel this energy by becoming a builder and really focus your attention on stabilizing your resources, making your physical world feel safe and abundant, and really grounding yourself and really acting out on your values. And your outlet for stress is really found in simplicity, whether that's organizing, things on your shelf, or gardening, or just making sure that you have a comfortable and predictable routine, because you defeat fear essentially by really outlasting it with patience. You can't really be scared if you know what's going to happen and that everything's grounded, and you align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it will manifest as a deep need to ground yourself within the world. And so you solve the complex problems of Saturn by really focusing on one brick at a time and refusing to let anyone mess with your peace while you do this. And if this energy is out of whack, you could find yourself maybe hoarding things, maybe you hoard your energy, or you could just stay stuck in a bad situation just because it's familiar and you're terrified of the instability of change. But when you are aligned with this placement, you will become this unshakable rock for yourself and the people around you, because you're not frantically trying to run around and fixing everything at once. You are calmly instead building this life of high value and self-worth and groundedness that is designed to stand the test of time. And you look incredibly composed while doing it. No matter what's happening on the inside, I know you could still have some chaos. And so to really master this energy, you have to be okay with going at your own pace, even if the world is screaming at you to hurry up. And when the pressure mounts, your best move is to actually stop, assess what you have, and focus on steady, tangible progress rather than quick fixes. And you build, success, or you overcome obstacles, realizing that quality and stability are way more important than speed, and that your ability to remain consistent is what eventually will get you to that finish line. When the planet that rules Saturn is in the sign of Gemini, the way you handle restriction and structure is actually quite mental and verbal, because you need to think your way through problems and you process the weight of the world by taking it apart, analyzing the pieces, maybe talking about it because it's Gemini. Because if you keep your worries bottled up inside, they will turn into this overwhelming mental noise for you probably. And the mechanics here, they're kind of flexible and curious. And so instead of carrying the burden alone, you are meant to use your intellect to find loopholes, the shortcuts, and the smarter ways to get the job done that maybe other people are overlooking. And you channel this energy by stepping into the role of the investigator or the connector, where your main outlet for stress is gathering information and asking the right questions. And when Saturn feels like a heavy wall in your life, you can use your words and your curiosity to find the door, realizing that you can negotiate or learn your way out of a tight spot. And this will align with the nature of the actual ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it is specifically about using flexibility to keep from getting stuck. And you find relief when you can ventilate your stress, either through conversation, writing, or just researching the problem until it doesn't feel so scary anymore. And when you aren't aligned, this can look like analysis paralysis straight up, because when you're so busy researching or talking about your problems that you never actually do anything to fix them, or you get scattered and anxious, this could overwhelm you. But when you are using this energy well, you could look like a tactical genius who can really adapt to any situation, and you could become the person who can explain complex issues simply and find clever, innovative solutions that nobody else thought of because they were too busy following the rules, whereas you were reading the fine print and you found that loophole that really brings everything together. And so to use this energy to the best of your ability, you need to remember that your voice and your mind are your best tools for building structure. So when you feel blocked, don't suffer in silence. Reach out to somebody, start a conversation, or learn a new skill that helps you pivot, because your mastery comes when you realize that you don't have to be super rigid to be a responsible person. You can be adaptable, clever, and communicative and still build something that lasts. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in Cancer, the way you process the heavy responsibilities of life is deeply tied to your emotional state, maybe your sense of stability and safety, but also your intuition, because the moon is very intuitive, and you really can't separate your work from your feelings with this placement, which is totally okay. It doesn't mean you can't succeed. So when Saturn applies pressure, your first instinct is usually to retreat into your shell and protect your soft, your soft skin, rather than charging out to fight. And the mechanics here are all about the ebb and flow, meaning that you build your best structures when you're feeling emotionally secure and supported. But if you feel unsafe or exposed, you might completely shut down or put up walls that are impossible for others to climb, which can block you from a lot of things in life. And you channel this energy by leaning into the role of the protector, where your outlet for stress involves creating a safe haven for yourself and the people you care about. And you need to establish a home base, whether that's a literal physical space, maybe an emotional private space, like this emotional safe haven almost, or just a group of people who feel like family, because having a safe place to land really allows you to handle the harshness of the outside world as good as you can. And this will align with the nature of the actual ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it specifically means that your resilience will really come from your ability to nurture. And you deal with the coldness of Saturn by generating warmth, ensuring that whatever you are building has heart and soul. And so when this energy is out of alignment, you can get moody, defensive, manipulative, or you can use your emotions as an excuse to avoid doing the hard work, or you could just hide away from the world entirely and shut down. But when you are in alignment, you possess this incredible soft power where you are essentially the rock for everybody else and yourself. And you could be the person who really builds something great and overcomes a lot by being personal and caring. And you can manage huge responsibilities without ever losing your empathy or your intuition. And so to really master this placement, you really do need to validate your own need for safety and privacy instead of judging yourself for being too sensitive in the moment. And your mastery really comes when you realize that you don't have to be cold just to be strong. You can build a life that is both structurally sound and emotionally fulfilling, using your intuition primarily to guide you towards commitments that actually feel like home and that feel safe for you. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the sign of Leo, your mechanism for dealing with limitation is actually connected to your identity, your pride, and your need for self-expression. Because you don't just want to be a cog in the machine that doesn't really matter, because you want to feel like the work that you are doing is a reflection of your unique light. So when Saturn restricts you, it can feel like a personal blow to your ego or your confidence. You could struggle with confidence at times, and the energy here works best when you feel seen and appreciated. So you could struggle with with discipline if the task feels boring, anonymous, or like it's dimming your sparkle. If it doesn't feel personal, you're gonna not like it because you're designed to put your heart into everything you do. And you kind of channel this energy by becoming a performer. This doesn't need to be like on a big stage. It could just mean like the creator almost in your own movie, or maybe you're just a creative leader where your outlet for the heavy stuff is actually found in play, creativity, and taking ownership of your talents. And you need to find a way to really infuse your personality into your responsibilities and turn your burdens into a stage where you can show off your competence and your flair, even if it's just for yourself. And this will align with the nature of the actual ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it acts as a reminder that you need to be proud of what you build, and you relieve the pressure by making sure that at the end of the day, you can look at your work and say, I did that, and feel a genuine sense of dignity and joy. And if you aren't using this energy well, you could struggle with a fragile ego or need constant praise to stay motivated, or you could freeze up and do nothing because you're terrified of looking bad and failing in front of an audience or even failing yourself. However, when you are aligned, you are a radiant authority figure who leads with warmth and generosity. And you look like somebody who is disciplined, not because they have to be, but because they have too much self-respect to deliver anything less than excellence. And to use this energy to the best of your ability, do not wait for permission to take up space and just start creating from the art and do what resonates with you, because your mastery really comes when you realize that your unique creative expression is the structure. And by staying true to who you are, you naturally command the respect and stability that Saturn is promising in your life. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the sign of Virgo, the way you handle the chaotic or heavy parts of life is by breaking them down into tiny manageable details and organizing them. And you aren't really one for grand sweeping gestures when things get tough. Instead, you really find your footing by focusing on the process, the routine, and the practical steps that need to be taken right now. And the mechanics here are about optimization and service. So if you don't have a clear plan or a job to do, the anxiety of Saturn can feel paralyzing, as if you're staring at a mess that you don't know how to clean up. And you channel this energy by stepping into the role of almost the editor or the healer, really finding your outlet in the act of refining, fixing, and improving things. And when you feel the weight of the world, your best move is to make a list, clean your space, or help someone else solve a practical problem, because being useful grounds you. You need to keep your mind busy. This is what really helps you, because this will align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it specifically means that you find relief in the ritual of daily life, and you dismantle the big scary mountain of responsibility by focusing entirely on the single step that you are taking right now, really trusting that the details will eventually add up to the whole picture. And when this is out of alignment, you can get trapped in a cycle of worry, hypochondria, or nitpicking, where nothing is ever perfect enough to move forward, and you paralyze yourself with criticism. But when you are in alignment, you are incredibly efficient and helpful, or the person who, really holds the whole system together with competence. And you really look like the master of your craft, who makes the difficult work look easy because you've created such a flawless, supportive routine to handle it. And so to really master this energy, just let go of the idea of perfect and focus on what is better. Only focus on better just to get yourself started, because your mastery comes when you realize that your attention to detail can be a gift, not a curse, and that by showing up every day and doing the small things with care, you are building an unshakable foundation that can really weather any storm, and that can be effective. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in Libra, the way you process the heavy responsibilities of life is almost entirely filtered through either your relationships, your sense of balance and harmony. It's kind of how you weigh the scales of life and how you relate to other forces in your life. And you aren't really designed to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders all by yourself. And so instead, you process limitations by looking at them through the lens of other people, looking at them from an objective, balanced lens, and you constantly weigh options to find the fairest, most harmonious path forward. And the mechanics here are social and strategic. It's a mix of both. And so when Saturn applies pressure, you might feel this intense urge to find a sounding board, because dealing with the harsh realities of life could feel unmanageable if you don't have, someone or something to share the burden with, to really bounce ideas off of. Or you may feel like you don't have a clear sense of justice or fairness to guide you, because you do want to consider multiple options. emotions. And you channel this energy by stepping into the role of a diplomat or a strategist, where your outlet for stress really involves negotiation, collaboration, or creating beauty out of chaos. And you need to leverage your connections, using your ability to see both sides of an argument to talk your way into a more stable position, or to balance your way into a more stable position, rather than trying to brute force your way through obstacles without, a lot of mind to that. And this will align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it specifically means that your structure is built on agreements and contracts, and you relieve the tension of Saturn by bringing things back into equilibrium, or finding a solution that satisfies everyone and all of the variables involved, so that you can move forward with a clear conscience and a sense of knowing. And when this energy is out of alignment, you might find yourself fading into codependency. Maybe you're paralyzed by indecision because you're terrified of upsetting the balance, or you could become superficial and try to kind of make nice of a situation, put a pretty little band-aid on the gashing wound instead of dealing with the ugly truth. But when you are in alignment, you could look like the person who can walk into conflict and calmly build a bridge between two opposing forces, and you use that Libra need for fairness to create structures that are sustainable because they are fair. And you could really become the glue that holds things and commitments together. And to really master this placement, you have to realize that asking for help or collaboration, it's not a weakness. It is a specific strategy for success that will work specifically with your design, and your mastery comes when you stop trying to go at it alone, or, trying to rush through things, and you start seeing either relationships or harmony and observing things from a detached lens, almost as a bedrock for your security. Really understanding that true balance doesn't mean that conflict will never come. It's about having the grace to manage it effectively and fairly, which if anybody has the ability to do that, it is you. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in Scorpio, your mechanism for dealing with restrictions and fears can feel very intense and private and focused on survival. I actually have this placement too. Saturn in Aries, Mars in Scorpio, and woo-wee. With this placement, we don't want to just fix things on the surface. We have this need to dig all the way down to the root, stare that darkness in the face, and really transform it completely. And the mechanics here are all about power and regeneration. So when Saturn tries to block you, you don't back down. You tend to go underground. You're brooding and plotting until you have gathered enough emotional strength to essentially blow up the obstacles or completely reinvent yourself in order to get around it. And so you channel this energy by becoming an alchemist, where your outlet for stress really involves deep psychological work. Maybe you do some research, or you deal with the taboo subjects that others are too scared to touch, and you find your stability by stripping away everything that is fake or unnecessary and focusing purely on what is real and what is permanent, even if it's a little bit uncomfortable. And this will align with the nature of the ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it will manifest as a drive to really establish safety through control and depth, and recapturing your power and alchemizing through your rough experiences. And you solve the problems of Saturn by engaging your survival instinct, really proving that no matter how much you lose or how hard it gets, you have the inner resources to really rise from the ashes. And if this energy is misaligned, you could become paranoid, maybe power hungry, overly defensive, or even face some burnout, really seeing enemies anywhere and refusing to trust anyone with your vulnerabilities. However, when you are in alignment, you possess an unbreakable resilience that is honestly kind of intimidating to others, but so powerful within yourself. And you look like the person who could be the calmest in a crisis, even if you're panicking a little bit inside, or the one who can handle the messy, complex, and emotional undercurrents of life without flinching, because you've already made peace with the shadows. And that is the best way this placement can play out. And so to use this energy to the best of your ability, you really, really, really need to embrace your intensity rather than trying to numb it out or dull it down. And your mastery comes when you realize that your ability to endure pain and transform is your greatest asset, and being willing to go deeper than anybody else really helps you to build a foundation of emotional, financial, spiritual security, like this sense of power that is virtually indestructible. When the planet that rules Saturn is in Sagittarius, the way you handle the boundaries and the rules of life is by trying to find the meaning behind them, and you honestly struggle to follow orders or stick to a routine if you don't understand the big picture behind it. And so when Saturn puts a wall in front of you, your instinct could be to try to climb over it to see the horizon on the other side. And the mechanics here are the philosophical and expansive mechanisms here, which essentially means that you process weight by needing to believe that the struggle is leading you to somewhere important. You need to be optimistic, or you need to, see the light at the end of the tunnel at the very least, effectively turning your hard work into this pilgrimage or a journey to something better rather than just a chore that you kind of have to do, but it won't really lead you anywhere. And you channel this energy by stepping into your role of the philosopher or the teacher or the expansive, I don't know what to call this, adventurer. That might be the word. I'm just going to go with that. But essentially you find your outlet in learning or traveling, maybe spreading a message that you believe in and expanding your horizons that make your problems seem not so bad after all. And you need to widen your perspective when you feel trapped, and use your optimism and your faith to visualize a future that is bigger than your current limitations. And this will align obviously with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it specifically means that your relief comes from expansion and wisdom, and you really have to go after what it is that you want to go after, whether you're just at home reading a text or you go on this big adventure outside of your home. And you deal with the restriction of Saturn by turning your life into a quest for truth, realizing that the discipline is just the vehicle that helps you to get to your destination. And when you aren't using this energy well, you could become dogmatic, preachy, or avoidant and run away from responsibilities to chase a fantasy because you can't stand being tied down. But when you're in alignment, you could look like a wise mentor who walks the walk and not just talks the talk, and you're able to commit to the hard work because you have a vision that inspires you, and you become the Sagittarius fire to stay enthusiastic even when the road gets long, eventually becoming this authority figure who could teach others how to live with purpose, or at the very least, you could feel very fulfilled yourself. And so to master this energy, you have to find a why that is big enough to justify the how. And your mastery comes when you realize that freedom and discipline aren't opposites. In fact, discipline is the very thing that buys you your freedom. And by committing to your own personal truth, you can build a life that feels like this grand adventure. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in Capricorn, the way you process the harder parts of life is through a deep sense of realism and endurance. And you likely have an old soul quality where you kind of instinctively understand that good things take time. And so when you face a limitation or a blockage, you don't just look for a shortcut. You're pretty realistic about it and you settle in for the long haul. And the mechanics here are about gravity and consequences. And so you handle pressure best when you can really see the reality of a situation clearly and strip away the fluff and the fantasy to deal with the roots of what is actually in front of you and to really get down to the nitty gritty on what actually matters. And you can channel this energy by stepping into this stewardship role where you can really become a master at whatever it is that you're doing, where your outlet for stress is found in competence and taking responsibility for your own corner of the world. And you need to feel like you are building something solid, whether it's a skill, maybe a family tradition, a body of work, or just your own character. You could just be building yourself, because having a sense of duty actually grounds you. And this obviously is going to align with the nature of the ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it really does act as a stabilizing force being in Capricorn, and you relieve the heavy tension of Saturn by showing up and doing the work, whatever it is that you do. Even if you don't know what you're doing, you just have to start because you said you would. And this helps you to feel such a deep satisfaction in your own reliability, which could actually point you to the right directions through persistence alone. And when this energy is out of alignment, you could be incredibly hard on yourself. Maybe you fall into a state of melancholy or rigidity where you really feel like you're carrying the weight of the world alone, and it can be isolating. But when you are in alignment, you are a mountain, a literal mountain, because you're unshakable, and you could also be respected. And you're the person that your friends or your family could call when things fall apart. but it's because you're able to stay calm and honor your word, and you could have the wisdom to weather the storm without complaining. And so this trait in you is something that you can not only use to improve your life, but others can lean on you as well. And so to really master this energy, you have to realize that your worth isn't about how much you achieve. It's about the integrity from which you live your life. And your mastery really comes when you accept that time is your friend, not your enemy. Because you have time, you can do so much with it. And by committing to doing the things right and doing the right things rather than just doing the easy thing or the thing you think you have to do, you build a sense of self-respect that no one can ever take away from you. When the ruler of Saturn is in Aquarius, the way you process limitations and rules is by analyzing the system and figuring out how to upgrade it. And you really struggle with doing things simply because that's how it's been done before. And so when Saturn restricts you, your instinct could be to detach, maybe look at a situation from a bird's eye view and invent new ways of moving forward that is more efficient or more fair. It's just better. You like to optimize with Aquarius. And so the mechanics here are intellectual, maybe a little bit rebellious, meaning you handle the weight of responsibility best when you are allowed to be independent and innovative rather than just being forced in a box that feels outdated or suffocating. And you will channel this energy by being this architect for your own vision, where your outlet for stress involves maybe connecting with technology or connecting with other people, connecting with society or community, or engaging with progressive ideas at the very least. And you need to feel like you are part of a larger cause, and you really need to feel like you're using your unique perspective to solve problems that affect everybody rather than just getting bogged down in your own personal drama. This is how you can really channel this placement. It has to be more than just about yourself, and by helping others, you kind of help yourself in some way. And this will obviously align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it specifically means that your structure comes from your individuality. So you can still be an individual, like I said, and you relieve the pressure by breaking the rules that don't make sense and creating your own set of standards that really align with your vision for the future. And if you aren't using this energy well, you could become aloof or stubborn or totally alienated, or you could feel like an outsider who refuses to participate in the real world because it doesn't meet your ideals. However, when you are aligned, you could be a genius who disrupts the status quo for the better. And you could look like the person who remains cool and objective in a crisis, really bringing people together or bringing your vision together and building systems that are inclusive, brilliant, and way ahead of their time. And so to use this energy to the best of your ability, you have to embrace your role as the outsider and trust your unique vision no matter what. Even if you don't really know where it's going, just trust it no matter what. And your mastery comes when you realize that what makes you unique is actually your greatest objective asset. It's not just a subjective thing. And by having the courage to do things differently, you create a life that is both stable and incredibly free. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in Pisces, the way you handle harsh realities and boundaries of life is through surrender, intuition. You have to be very fluid with Pisces placements. And so you do handle crisis very fluidly, no matter how much stress you feel. And you're not built to really harden yourself against the world. Instead, you process the heaviness of Saturn by dissolving it and needing to find a spiritual or emotional meaning behind your suffering just to make sense of it. And the mechanics here could be subtle, but they're very absorbent. So if you try to force yourself into a strictly logical or dry routine, you could feel overwhelmed or exhausted because your system needs time to drift, to dream, and to process things on a subconscious level or, a more imaginative level. And you channel this energy by really stepping into the role of the dreamer or the healer. Maybe you find an outlet in art or music or meditation or acts of compassion, something where you can really dissolve your being into something that is tangible, but a little bit, outside of yourself, something a little bit imaginative. And you need to allow yourself to flow around obstacles like water rather than trying to smash through them like a rock. And you need to realize that your true strength lies in adaptability in your faith. And this will obviously align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it manifests as a need for transcendence. And you relieve the pressure of the material world by periodically escaping in it in a healthy way, obviously, because because if you reconnect with the divine or creative source that you feel tapped into, this will help you recharge your batteries. And when this is out of alignment, you could struggle with boundaries. Maybe you fall into victimhood, escapism, or addiction, or maybe you kind of become a little bit too compassionate because the reality of Saturn feels too harsh to bear. But when you are in alignment, you possess a beautiful, serene discipline that looks like magic to everybody else and yourself. And you are the person who can bring a sense of sacred into the mundane world. And you can bring a life that is compassionate, artistically fulfilling, and also allows you to dream a little bit because you can trust that the universe has your back. Even if you can't see the path clearly, you just need to be true to yourself. And so to really master this placement, you have to stop judging yourself for not being practical in the traditional sense and trust your intuition as a guide more than you would intuitively allow yourself to, because your mastery comes when you realize that surrender is actually a form of strength. It's a tool that can open so many doors for you. And by aligning your work with a higher purpose, you create a structure that is flexible, resilient, but also deeply connected to your soul. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your first house, the mechanism for handling life's heavy responsibilities is completely tied to your sense of self, your physical body, and your identity in some way. And you can't really outsource your problems or hide behind a team with this placement because the pressure falls directly on you to show up and be the solution in whatever it is that you're doing. And the energy here dictates that your ability to handle structure and limitation is really filtered through your personality and your sense of being in some way, meaning that you often have to wear your responsibility and become the face of the work that you do. And if you try to stay in the background or let others drive the metaphorical car of your life, you'll likely feel a sense of frustration or aimlessness because your specific lesson is about taking personal ownership of your life. And you channel this energy by really focusing on self-development and personal branding. This is a good way to channel it. And the outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in working on yourself, whether that's disciplining your body at the gym or refining your style or just building a character or sense of confidence that is strong enough to carry the load. And you solve the problems of Saturn by stepping up and saying, I can handle it, using your own initiative to break through barriers. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here specifically means that you are the tool for overcoming obstacles, just you in its entirety. And you relieved the tension by really asserting your identity and realizing that the stronger you become as an individual, the easier the rest of your life will become to manage. And when this placement is kind of out of alignment, you might be incredibly hard on yourself or feel like every failure is a personal flaw. Or you could become a little bit rigid and defensive, really putting up a tough exterior to keep people out. But when you are in alignment, you possess a natural authority and a presence that really commands respect without you even having to speak. And you look like somebody who is entirely self-made or a person who has mastered themselves so thoroughly that they can handle anything the world throws at them with dignity. And so to really master this energy, you have to get comfortable with being the main character in your own life, even if it doesn't come naturally. And your mastery comes when you realize that prioritizing yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary maintenance because you are the foundation upon which everything else in your life is being built. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the second house, the way you process limitations and responsibilities is really deeply connected to your resources, your values, and your self-worth. And you aren't really built to deal with abstract stress. You really need to solve problems in a tangible and material way. And the mechanics here are about sustainability and security. And so when Saturn applies pressure, your instinct is to either check your bank account, secure your assets, or to really evaluate, okay, what value do I have right now? And you handle the weight of the world by ensuring that you have enough stuff to really survive the pressure of the world. And you might struggle deeply if you feel unstable, whether it's financially or with your confidence, or if you're not really producing a visible physical result. And so you channel this energy best when you're building tangible wealth or stability and security, and when you're really building your skills. And so the outlet for your Saturnian stress is either found in earning, saving, or cultivating things of value like skills. And you really need to put your energy into projects that have a very clear return of investment, because seeing your hard work turn into physical proof, like a paycheck, a collection, a garden, or a skill, is really what calms your nervous system down. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it acts as a grounding tool, and you relieve the pressure by slowing down and focusing on the simple sensory pleasure of having enough and really using what you have to build a fortress of safety around you. And so if you aren't using this energy well, you could fall into a scarcity mindset. Maybe you hoard your money, or you stay in a job you hate just for your paycheck, or you could be terrified that you'll lose everything if you take a risk, but you could also just lack confidence and a belief in yourself. However, when you are aligned, you are the rock solid provider who knows exactly what they are worth, and you look like somebody who can build a legacy of quality, understanding that true security comes not just from what you own, but the unshakable confidence that you have that your skills are going to provide for you no matter what happens. And so to use the energy to the best of your ability, you really need to define what value truly means to you beyond just the numbers. And your mastery really comes when you realize that your greatest resource is your own stability. And by taking slow, steady approaches to building your life, you really create a sense of worth that is completely independent of external validation. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your third house, the mechanism for processing structure and restriction is very mental, very verbal. That's what the third house is, because you handle the heavy parts of life by thinking about them or talking about them or organizing the logistics. And the energy here is very busy. It's very local, meaning that your responsibilities will often show up in your immediate environment or in your mind. And in some cases, it really affects your daily schedule or how you are perceiving the world generally. And your thought processes are kind of what tell you how you do color this world. And if you try to ignore the details or stay silent when you need to speak up, the pressure of Saturn could manifest as mental anxiety or scattered thinking, because your system needs to process data in order to feel safe. And so to channel this energy properly, you need to be learning, writing, or teaching. And the outlet for your Saturnian stress is communication and connecting the dots. You need to use your voice to really structure your reality, whether it's, creating a to-do list or having a difficult conversation to clear the air or learning a new skill that solves a specific problem. And this will obviously align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here specifically means that your words have weight. You relieve the tension by becoming the person who has the information or the one who can explain the rules or the plan to everybody else or even to yourself, thereby bringing order to the chaos through the clarity that you can create through your mindset. And when this placement is out of alignment, you could suffer from negative self-talk. You could worry incessantly about what you can't control, or you could get into petty arguments just to vent your frustration. But when you are in alignment, you are an incredible communicator who speaks with authority and precision, and you look like the person who always knows what to say and when to say it, using your mind to build bridges and organize your community or to organize your life, really turning complex problems into simple, manageable tasks, no matter what it is that you're applying your thoughts to. And so to really master this energy, you have to create your words as your most important tool. And your mastery comes when you realize that you don't have to know everything, but you do need to be willing to ask the right questions. That's all you need to do to start. And by keeping your mind open and your communication clear, you can navigate any obstacle that Saturn puts in your path. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your fourth house, the way that you process the heavy responsibilities and limitations of life is very deeply internal. It's private. It's emotional. I have this placement too. And you aren't somebody who really leaves your work at the door. Instead, you kind of process stress through your roots, meaning that if your home life or your living situation feels chaotic or unsafe, you'll find it almost impossible to build structure anywhere else in your life. And the mechanics here are all about your baseline of security. So when Saturn applies pressure, your instinct could be to retreat into your shell. Maybe go back to your family if that's applicable, or even just fix up your physical and mental and emotional space, because you really need a solid, quiet, safe haven to recharge before you are ready to face the world again. That's okay. And so you can channel this energy by becoming a protector of your own peace. And the outlet for your Saturnian stress is really found in establishing a home base or a sense of security that really is unshakable, whether that involves buying real estate, healing ancestral trauma, or just, fixing up your living space or your internal emotional body. And you really need to protect yourself from the outside world by building such a strong inner world that nothing can really shake you. And you have to build this empire, no matter how big or small, from the ground up, starting with your private life. And this will obviously align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I obviously talked about in the Saturn sign reading, but here it acts as an anchor to really hold you down and to make you feel safe. This is the tool you can use to make you feel safe. And you release relieve the tension by prioritizing your emotional safety and realizing that you have a duty to protect your inner child above all else before you worry about what's going on anywhere else. And so when this energy is out of alignment, you could feel weighed down by family burdens. You could be trapped by your past or carrying a heavy emotional backpack that keeps you from moving forward. But when you are in alignment, you could look like a giant tree that has such deep roots that no storm can knock that tree down. You could look like somebody who is incredibly emotionally resilient and supportive, and you become the rock of your family or your chosen tribe, and you can create safety and care that provides a stable foundation for everyone around you to grow as well. And so to really master this energy, you have to accept that your work starts from within, and your mastery comes when you realize that you don't have to sacrifice your comfort to be successful. In fact, prioritizing your rest, privacy, and emotional roots is exactly what gives you the strength to stand tall for the rest of your life. When the planet that rules Saturn is in your 5th house, the mechanism for handling structure and limitation is actually found through creativity, self-expression, and joy. And this can feel a little bit paradoxical because Saturn is serious and the 5th house is all about play. But for you, having fun is serious business, and you process the heaviness of life by making something beautiful out of it. And the mechanics here are about disciplined passion, meaning you struggle most when you feel ignored or uninspired or unable to shine because your system needs to output creative energy in order to really handle the input of this stress. And so you channel this energy by treating your talents and your happiness as a job. And so the outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in structure creativity. So this could be an artistic hobby that you take seriously. Maybe you mentor children or have your own children, and that's what your life centers around. Or maybe you're just turning your life into a performance where you get to be a star in whatever it is that you do, and you really get to tap into that childlike joy no matter what you're achieving. And you need to commit to your joy with the same intensity that others commit to their careers or their heavy responsibilities in life. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it specifically means that your work is to just be authentic. That's all you have to do to really, help with this Saturnian stress, because you relieve the tension by producing something that bears your unique signature, really proving that your existence matters because of what you create. And if you aren't using this energy well, you could suffer from creative blocks or fear of being seen, or you could just crush your own joy by being overly critical of how you're doing, really refusing to play unless there is some tangible result that you can see from that. However, when you are aligned, you are the master creator who commands whatever it is that you're doing with dignity and who really knows how to find fun in their life. And you look like somebody who can turn their passion into something much bigger. And you can blend discipline with flair in a way that makes your hard work look like art. And you can inspire others by simply being unapologetically yourself. And that is one of the biggest gifts that you can have with your Saturn placement. When the ruler of your Saturn is in the 6th house, the way you handle the chaotic or heavy parts of life is by breaking them down into a daily routine and working through them physically and systematically. And you aren't the one for very grand and abstract theories that don't actually work out in your life. You process responsibility through your habits, your health, maybe your service to others. It's how you approach day-to-day life. And the mechanics here are somatic and practical. So when Saturn puts pressure on you, your body will often keep the score. So if your daily life is disorganized or your health is neglected, you will feel the weight of Saturn 10 times heavier than anybody else. And so you can channel this energy by becoming an editor of your daily existence. And the outlet for your Saturnian stress is to find a ritual in the mundane. You could be cleaning, organizing, exercising, and being useful in a tangible way, and in a way that's unique to you, but in a way that actually works for you. And you need a job to do, a list to check off, or a problem to fix, because being productive really grounds you. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet, which I didn't mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it will act as a stabilizing rhythm. And you relieve the tension by focusing on the small, manageable details right in front of you, realizing that you can solve the biggest problems in your life by showing up and doing the little things right day after day. And when this placement is out of alignment, you could become a slave to your routine. You could struggle with health anxiety, perfectionism, or working yourself into the ground because you feel like you're never doing enough. But when you are in alignment, you are the most sufficient person in the room, and you look like a master of your craft who operates with this quiet, humble excellence, having built a lifestyle that really supports your physical and mental well-being so perfectly that you can handle high-pressure situations without ever breaking a sweat. And so to really master this energy, you need to find this sacredness in your ordinary routines. And your mastery really comes when you realize that your routine is the structure that really holds your life together. And by treating your body and your time with respect, you can build an unshakable resilience that allows you to be of service to the world and to yourself without burning yourself out. When the planet that rules Saturn is in your 7th house, the way you process the heavy responsibilities of life is almost entirely filtered through your one-on-one relationships, because you're not really designed to carry the weight in a world of isolation. Instead, you process limitation and structure by engaging with others or through your idea of connection in general, meaning that your sense of stability is often directly tied to the quality of your partnerships. The mechanics here are all about the other, and so when Saturn applies pressure, you likely feel an urge to find a partner or a business associate or a counselor to help you sort of work through this, because facing the harsh reality feels unmanageable without that counterbalance, and you channel this energy by stepping into the role of a collaborator or a negotiator. And the outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in making clear binding agreements, whether that's signing a contract, maybe getting married, or simply mediating a conflict between two sides. And you need to leverage the power of collaboration to build your life. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading. But here it specifically means that your structure is built on promises. You relieve the tension by defining the terms of engagement, and you realize that you feel safest when you know exactly what is expected of you and what you can expect from others in return. And when this placement is out of alignment, you could struggle with codependency or feel paralyzed if you don't have someone to really lean on, or you might attract heavy or critical people into your life because you're projecting your own need for discipline onto them. But when you are in alignment, you are like the person who is the rock in connections, but also you can use those connections to really build something fair in your life, because you can be fair, reliable, and incredibly committed and capable of building long-lasting unions, or at least useful unions that can weather any storm, simply because you are able to treat your commitments as a tool to really help propel you forward in life. And so to really master this energy, you have to treat your relationships as the most serious work that you do, or the tool that can help you unlock so much in your life. And your mastery comes when you realize that relying on others isn't a weakness, but a strategy, and choosing people who really stand behind what it is that you really stand for can help you build so much great in your life, no matter what it is that you're building. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the 8th house, the mechanism for handling structure and fear is incredibly intense, maybe private, and it's focused on the deeper undercurrents of life. And you process responsibility through transformation, meaning that you often deal with the heavy stuff, whether debt, taxes, psychological trauma, or deep emotional entanglements that other people try to avoid. And this is a tool that can help you master your Saturn. And the mechanics here are about survival and merging. So when Saturn applies pressure, you don't just want to fix it on the surface. You need to go underground, and you need to completely dismantle the problem and rebuild it from the ashes in order to feel safe again. And you attract this energy by becoming an alchemist or an investor into your own life. And so the outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in managing power, intimacy, maybe other people's connections or commitments or resources. It's a force outside of your control. And so you need to dig deep, whether that involves psychological self-work, maybe managing shared finances or debts, or navigating complex emotional bonds, because you find stability in the things that are hidden from plain view and mastering them. And this will obviously align with the nature of your ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it acts as a mechanism for regeneration. And you really relieve the tension by facing your fears head on and merging your energy with something or someone so powerful, trusting that you have the grit to handle the intensity. And if you aren't using this energy well, you could become paranoid, controlling, or overly fearful of loss. Maybe you hold on to things because you don't trust the flow of life. However, when you are aligned, you possess an unshakable emotional resilience, and you look like the person who's able to stay calm during the storm, or somebody who can navigate the darkest or most complicated complicated situations with absolute focus because you understand the real value of things and you aren't afraid of the dark. And so to use this energy to the best of your ability, you need to get comfortable with the concept of surrender and trust. And your mastery comes when you realize that true power isn't about controlling every outcome, but about knowing that no matter what you lose or how deep you fall, you have the inner resources to build yourself stronger than before. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your 9th house, the way you handle the boundaries and limitations of life is by trying to understand the why behind them. You struggle deeply with following rules just for the sake of it, and you process responsibility through your belief systems, maybe your education and your worldview. And the mechanics here are expansive, so when Saturn puts a wall in front of you, your instinct is to zoom out and look at the big picture, needing to find a philosophical or moral reason to endure the hardship. And if you feel trapped in a small life with no meaning, the weight of Saturn could become too unbearable, and you channel this energy by becoming an explorer or a professor or an expert at whatever it is that you're trying to expand or to learn. An outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in expanding your horizons, which could be through higher education, maybe travel, publishing, or committing yourself to a specific spiritual or ethical code. You need to structure your life around that quest for truth, and this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here specifically means that no matter what it is, your wisdom is your defense, and you relieve the tension by learning something new or stepping into a foreign environment, and it can help you realize that the world is much bigger than your current problem. And so when this placement is out of alignment, you may become dogmatic, judgmental, self-righteous, really using your beliefs as a weapon to criticize others, or you might run away from your problems constantly, whether it's, a literal escape or a mental escape, chasing a freedom that you never actually catch. But when you are in alignment, you can be this wise mentor who walks their talk and who uses their expansive pursuits to really get structure within your life. And you are somebody who has earned their wisdom through experience, and you can build a life that is guided by strong principles and a sense of adventure, really proving that discipline is actually the vehicle that can help take you to new heights. And so to really master this energy, you really have to commit to living your truth, even when it's inconvenient. And your mastery comes when you realize that your beliefs are the tool that you can use to really build that discipline, and you can dedicate yourself to constant learning and growth. And this will help you build a sense of purpose that acts as your compass through any storm that life can give you. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your 10th house, the way you process the heavy responsibilities of life is completely tied to your public reputation, your career, your ambitions, maybe your leadership ability, and you are naturally wired to seek a high position, meaning that you process limitation and stress by setting ambitious goals and climbing the ladder until you reach a place of respect or satisfaction or achievement, whatever it is that you're going after. And the mechanics here are vertical and visible. And so when Saturn applies pressure, your instinct is to work harder and prove your competence to the world, because feeling small or unrecognized makes the burden feel twice as heavy. And so you do need a title or a role or a status or at least a goal to really feel like your life has structure. And this is how you can work through that structure. And you channel energy by stepping into the role of the executive or the public leader or the ambitious, driven person. No matter how ambition looks for you, it doesn't have to be like you wearing a suit and going into a corporate building. It can look many ways. And so your outlet for Saturnian stress is found in taking charge of your professional life and building a legacy that everybody can see or that can impact a lot of people. And you need to be the one calling the shots or shouldering the responsibility for a major project, because having the weight of leadership or a goal on your shoulders actually centers you. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here specifically means that your goals are what kind of keep you centered, and you relieve the tension by achieving success, and you realize that you feel safest when you are actually going for something and when you can contribute to society within your public role. And so when this is out of alignment, you could become a workaholic. Maybe you sacrifice your personal life for a job that doesn't love you back, or even on simpler terms, you could just be terrified of failure or paralyzed by the fear of what people think of you. But when you are in alignment, you can look like a pillar of the community or whatever whatever contribution you're trying to make or whatever legacy you're trying to build. You will be somebody who has earned their place at the top through integrity and grit. And you are the person who sets the standard, and you can build goals and ambitions and results that really stand as a monument to your discipline and capacity. And this can help you manage wherever Saturn is in your chart. And so to really master this energy, you have to realize that true authority really comes from within. It's not a job title. And your mastery comes when you accept that you are meant to go after something bigger. And by committing to the path of excellence and public service, you really can build a reputation that is unshakable and that can help you overcome limitations in your life because it is built on something that is true to you and that also took time. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in the 11th house, your mechanism for handling structure and restriction is filtered through your social networks, your friends, your long-term dreams, your role in society, the bigger things that you want to achieve out of life, the communities you want to connect to. And you aren't really a lone wolf with this placement, or you're not meant to be at the very least, because you process the weight of the world by looking at how it affects the collective, meaning that your sense of stability comes from belonging to a group or a movement that shares your values. And the mechanics here are horizontal, they're collaborative. And so when Saturn puts a wall in front of you, you need to really rally the troops or look to your community or to a cause for support, because facing the future alone can be overwhelming and unsafe, but also this is how you can be grounded. And you channel this energy by becoming an organizer or a planner, because the outlet for your Saturnian stress is found in structuring your social circles or working towards a future vision, no matter what that is. And you need to be the one who brings people together for a purpose, whether that's organizing an event or managing a group project, starting a social media page, or just being the reliable friend who keeps people together. And this will obviously align with the nature of the ruling planet itself, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it specifically means that your network is kind of your net worth in some way, and you really relieve the tension of Saturn by focusing on your hopes and wishes for the future, and you can use your discipline to turn abstract dreams into concrete plans for the benefit of society or the group or whatever it is that you're a part of. And if you aren't using this energy well, you could feel alienated, you could feel judged, or you may feel like you have to stifle your own individuality just to fit in with people who don't actually support you or causes that don't support you, or you could just feel left out. However, when you are aligned, you are the architect of the future, and you can look like the person who can really get people together, get things done, work towards that cause, build that system, build that community, one that is inclusive, supportive, and designed to last. And you can prove that you can go much further together than you could ever go alone, and this can really help you relieve a lot of that Saturnian tension in your life. And so to use this energy to the best of your ability, you need to be selective about the company you keep, and you need to understand that your friends are the structure of your life. And so your mastery comes when you realize that your contribution to the collective actually matters. And by dedicating your discipline to a cause greater than yourself, you can build a sense of belonging that is truly secure. When the planet that rules your Saturn is in your 12th house, the way you handle the heavy, restrictive parts of life is deeply private. It's psychological and spiritual. It kind of transcends the material plane in some way, and you process responsibility almost in the dark, away from prying eyes. And this means that your greatest work is often done in solitude or behind the scenes, or this is where it can be done. This is the tool that can help you overcome Saturn. And so the mechanics here are subtle but dissolving. So when Saturn applies pressure, you don't fight it externally, or you shouldn't. You should be retreating inward to process it. And you need a lot of alone time to unravel the knots in your subconscious. And if you are forced to be on all the time without a break, you will feel mentally and spiritually exhausted. And you can channel this energy really by becoming a mystic or someone who is silently putting the puzzle pieces together, because the outlet for your Saturnian stress is really found in isolation or spiritual practice, maybe even working in institutions where you serve others without credit, like hospitals, libraries, or retreats. Take what resonates with that. And you really need to build a safe haven for your soul. And this safe haven, or whatever you're building and the tool that you're using, will obviously align with the nature of that ruling planet, which I did mention in the Saturn sign reading, but here it kind of acts as a bridge to the invisible, and you relieve the tension by surrendering to the flow and engaging in deep introspection. And you can realize that true strength comes from your connection to something bigger than the material world. And so when this is out of alignment, you could struggle with vague anxieties, feelings of imprisonment or self-sabotage, feeling like you're almost fighting invisible enemies that nobody else can see. But when you are in alignment, you can possess a quiet, unshakable power that really can't be torn down by anything. And you can look like the person who works miracles from the shadows, or someone who has mastered their own demons and uses that wisdom to help others heal. And you can build structures with the tools that you have, and those can be compassionate and restorative structures that you build. And you can understand that the most important foundations are the ones that are hidden underground. And so to really master this energy, you have to stop fearing your own solitude. You have to stop fearing, what you don't know and the unseen forces, and start seeing it as your laboratory. It's something that you can master. And your mastery really comes when you realize that your sensitivity is a form of intelligence. And by creating a disciplined spiritual or private practice, you can really build an inner safe haven that gives you peace no matter what is happening on the outside world, and that can really help you to overcome so many challenges in your life.